Call to order the Planning Commission meeting for Thursday, May 20th, 2021. Please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Harlicker, please call the roll.
Yeah, Commissioner Knobloch, excuse me, Commissioner Casey. Here. Commissioner Heikkila.
Here.
Commissioner Bradley.
Here.
Commissioner Schmolke.
Here.
Commissioner Geisler.
Here.
And Chair Schwartz.
Here. Okay, our first order of business this evening is to adopt our agenda. Commissioner Knobloch,
I move to adopt the agenda for this evening.
Second.
motion by Knobloch, second by Schmolke. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda is adopted. Next, we have approval of the minutes of our April 15th meeting.
Chair Schwartz.
Commissioner Heikkila.
I move to approve the minutes from the April 15th meeting.
Second.
Motion by Heikkila, second by Casey. Any comments, corrections? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And the minutes are approved. First case under new business this evening is planning case 21-12, preliminary plat for Noberg Corner, 10203 Linnet Street, Noberg Homes. Mr. Harlicker.
Yes, good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Excuse me. This first item is a preliminary plat. Property is located on Linnet and 102nd Avenue. It's proposing 5 single-family lots. 4 of them will have access off of the cul-de-sac. There's an existing house on this property. That'll remain and it'll be platted on a separate lot and with access off of Linnet. All the lots comply with the dimensional requirements of the LDR2 zoning district. One of the unique pieces of this is Outlot A, which was platted as part of Wooddale Estates, went tax forfeiture, and the property owner was able to acquire that from the state and incorporate it into the project. That's how they've got the access for lots 2, 3, and 4 off of the cul-de-sac. So that's being incorporated into this project. The lot is 2.37 acres in size. The lots will range in size from 13,000 square feet to 29,000 square feet. For comparison, the minimum lot size in the LDR2 zoning district is 10,800 square feet. Grading, drainage, and utilities have been reviewed by the engineering department. Most of the trees across the front here will be removed because of the grading. The trees to the rear, as well as along this property line in this area here and here, will be preserved. There's a stormwater pond being proposed at this location here. It's infiltration basin, it's not a pond. Park dedication is due for the 5 lots in the amount of $2,000 per lot. And staff is recommending the Planning Commission recommend approval of the preliminary plat with the conditions that all engineering comments be addressed. Park dedication in the amount of $10,000, which is $2,000 per lot, be paid prior to releasing the plat for recording. And applicant verify proof of ownership of Outlot A, Wooddale Estates, prior to releasing the plat for recording. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Harlicker. Commission, any questions for Mr. Harlicker?
Mr. Harlicker, would you point out Outlot A again? I'm having trouble seeing
Yeah,
your little,
it's this little strip right here,
okay,
right along the north side of right along the north side of the cul-de-sac.
okay. I'm having trouble seeing your little, arrow from this angle anyway.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Harker, since there was already a house on Lot A, hadn't that property already been assessed a park dedication?
It was not, that lot was platted back in the 40s prior to park dedication.
Okay, thank you. Is the petitioner present, and would they like to say anything?
I'm present, I have nothing to say unless you have questions for me.
All right, then at this time, we will have a public hearing on this matter, so I will open a public hearing in planning case 21-12, the preliminary plat for Noberg Corner, 10203 Linnet Street, Noberg Homes. Anyone wish to speak at this public hearing? Please come up to the microphone, give your name and address for the record, please. And please limit your comments to 3 minutes if, thank you.
My name is Becky Taylor. I live at 1818 103rd Avenue, which bumps into the corner. That corner up there.
Up there?
Yes.
Okay.
My question is that exactly where the lot lines are going to be going? And is that fifth lot going to be that huge?
This one, yes, it is.
And is there any plans for a street to come off of the Circle Street at some later time to cut through anywhere there?
Chair and Commissioners, there are no plans at this time, and the placement of the house up here would really preclude a street from going through.
Thank you. I'm hoping that that is exactly what's going to happen, because I don't want to have any surprises down the road. I don't want anybody telling me something today to keep me quiet tonight. It seems like those of us who have larger lots, they're trying to shrink them and make them smaller and smaller, and if we'd have wanted a smaller lot to start with, we wouldn't have bought these pieces of property. And there are 11 houses between Ibis and Linnet. 3 of those people have passed away. The other 8 of us have been there. We were the last ones to have moved in 1973. So we like this neighborhood. We like these lots. We don't want to see our lots be shrunk down by public domain, whatever you want to call it, pressure from the city to say you don't need this much property. We just don't want that to happen down the road.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak at the public hearing?
David Taylor, I also live at 1818 103rd. I have a question. What are you calling this here?
It's a infiltration
So
basin. Water will run there and infiltrate into the ground.
that's by design,
Yes.
okay? So then this is the cul-de-sac here, and this is Linnet?
Yep,
All right. And this is the existing home?
correct.
So now this existing home, that lot, is that lot,
Lot 1.
okay, it's not gonna go all the way back to this line, is it?
No, it's right here.
Okay, so this lot has been made smaller,
Correct.
okay? So where are you removing trees? Like all along here?
Yep. Where that dashed line is,
Yep.
right in through there. Then these areas here, here, and along this property line are where the trees preserved, as well as back here.
So it's not feasible to try to build the house into the trees?
Because of the grading that's required to make the sites ready to put houses on.
Okay. And what will the size of this retention, or whatever you're calling it, gonna be?
Size as far as square footage?
Sure.
I don't know. It looks like it's
About 30 by 100?
our mathematician is figuring it out.
And so that'll just be what, a depression?
Depression, yes.
I'm not happy with that.
Good evening, Chair Schwartz, members of the committee. My name is Matt Johnson. I live at 1860 102nd Avenue Northwest, right across from this development. I have a lot of concerns about this, the trees being one of them. We have a lot of deer and wildlife. I think we have an owl living in the trees, so I think we've got a lot of nature across that in this lot. And other concerns regarding like construction timing, those types of things, but I know those will come down the road. One of my biggest concerns right now, though, with this development is Lot 2. For consistency with the other neighbor, I would like to see that facing Linnet Street as opposed to 102nd. The other neighbor who's here, their house on the corner faces Linnet, and I just think for neighborhood consistency, continuity, I would like to see Lot 2, instead of front facing 102nd, face Linnet, so that we have more of a consistent neighborhood. You're not coming off Linnet and seeing a backyard, you're seeing a house there. So that's one of the concerns I'd like to see addressed in this. Everything else, I work in development services with the city of Minneapolis, so I understand the development, but it is a shame to see this big lot go subdivided into houses. But that's one of the bigger concerns that I would like to see done. I also have a concern. I am looking at this right here. There's a fire hydrant right in front of, in between lots 4 and 5. I think I read in the report that was going to be relocated. Do you have any information on that?
I do not.
Do not. I would just like more information on the fire hydrant, where it's going to be relocated, how it's going to be relocated, how long the water will be disconnected for the fire hydrant. So if we could get that information, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak at this public hearing?
Yes, good evening. I'm Mike Moore. I work at, neighbor of Matt's here at 1850 102nd Avenue. My biggest concern is, as we move forward with this whole development stuff like that, of who's actually going to be maintaining this property up until actual development is. Because as of right now, nobody is actually taking care of this property as it is. Grass is overgrown. We're sick of looking at it. We like the trees, we like the neighborhood, but we don't like what we're seeing across the as everybody else would in the city that lives here. I know that the city, maybe I'm barking at the wrong tree with the wrong people, but I know that we've gotten stuff in the mail before where, hey, your grass is so long, who's taking care of it? And I know that the city owns that partial of land that the trees along the street there that you want to take down and stuff like that. I mean, again, you as a city own it, you don't maintain it, okay? And my biggest thing is with all the trees and stuff like Matt was saying, we do have wildlife there, we do have deer through there, we do have a white owl that does live on lot number 5 right there, and now all that's gonna be gone. And it's just sad to see that throughout the city, like the Caribou Coffee, we took down a huge chunk of trees, and where are we gonna stop within the city of taking down what looks nice and what people drive in the neighborhood? My wife and I just moved in 2 years ago. And what brought us to Coon Rapids and to this block was it was a nice developed area. We like the trees, we like the neighborhood, we like the people. Now we come in there and clear cut it. Now it looks like a brand new development out of a cornfield. This is where we want to live? No, I don't want to. And if we're gonna have that way, I'm gonna have to probably move out. And that's how I feel about stuff. It's just, we've all talked about it, and we're just wanting to know. Another thing was, if they go to develop these homes down the road, will they mimic what the houses we live in, to not have like some McMansion living across the street? Is that possible? I don't know. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Sir,
On the ownership of the property, none of this land is owned by the city. Thank you.
thank you. Anyone else wish to speak at the public hearing?
Good evening, my name is Wendy Cucharella. I live at 10141 Linnet Street. And I think I just kind of wanted to also voice my concerns about how the land is going to be handled, and especially if there's any consideration with how water runoff is. So we already have water that comes down Linnet Street when we get heavy rains, and it piles up where our cul-de-sac comes off Linnet, right in front of our driveway, and our place there. Obviously, it's really heavy rains that causes a problem there, but more importantly, every winter we get ice dams there, and we actually have to go out there and chip through that so we can get our cars in and out of there, and that's been an ongoing problem. There's been some changes in the roadway there, but I really think that, it would be awesome if this is going to go forward, if we could look at something like some of the rain gardens, some of the other stuff. I know you have the pond there at the east end of it, and grading may take care of some of that, but we still have the runoff actually in the street, and that hopefully would be dealt with as well.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? The petitioner like to answer any of the questions that have been raised.
Good evening, Chair and Commission members. My name is Wade Tullis with Noberg Homes. I guess I'd be happy to answer some of the questions for the neighbors, but as far as the development, of course, we all love trees, we all love animals, but this wouldn't be the place to address that. That would be somewhere else that would take this out of a conforming zoning development. So we're not asking for anything outside of what the zoning allows. As far as some of the grading, the water runoff, we actually would be cleaning up any of those concerns. Our engineers and the city's engineers have developed everything to go into the storm piping or the infiltration area that is engineered to keep any water infiltrates to the ground. So that would all be addressed in us cleaning this up. As far as the concerns with the mowing and stuff, I mean, we would come right in, we would grade everything, clear cut everything, and build the houses, so it would be a nice, full, clean neighborhood, fully sodded, everything like that. So the overgrown and some of the stuff, those concerns would be addressed. So, and as far as lot 2, I don't think turning it to Linnet, we'd have to have all the engineers look at it, but I don't believe it's a conforming lot that way, no more. It wouldn't have the depth on it. Was there any questions that I missed there?
I think that covers most of it. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, one final call. Anybody else wish to speak at the public hearing?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Buccioni.
On Zoom, no attendees wishing to address this agenda item.
Thank you. And at this time, we'll close the public hearing and contain all comments to the commission. Commission, your thoughts?
Mr. Harlicker? If this gets approved, is there a timeline for these folks to know when the buildings would be built, et cetera? Would one building have to be sold before another one is built, or would they all 5 be built? All 5 be built together?
I think the applicant might be better off answering the the timeline for development. The city does not have a set timeline by when the houses have to be built.
It's the 4 lots, the one's already existing, and we would.
You need to come to the microphone to speak, I'm sorry, sir.
No, no problem. So it's the 4 buildable lots, the 1 lot's an existing property. We would start, once everything was recorded, which would be probably July type neighborhood. Our anticipation would be by the fall or early winter, we'd be completed with all 4 houses.
Do you have buyers for them at this point?
We do not, no. We would build them, we would put up a model home or a spec home to bring in the buyers and then advertise that and sell off that property. But we're confident we'd sell them quickly.
When I drove through there the other day, are your proposed houses going to be of the same size and perhaps quality as the ones across the street from there?
Yes, it would be very similar, fit right in the neighborhood. Looks like there's some multi-levels, some split levels. I think there's a 2-story in the top of the cul-de-sac. We'd be right in line with that. We're not building any, I believe the comment was McMansions. We're not building any large scale properties like that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Schmolke.
one question. So is the water issue, I apologize, I wasn't quite sure, the water issue where they're having to break away the ice, could you point again to where that's collecting right now? Where the ice is forming? Did she say it was on Linnet or was that on 102nd, on the cul-de-sac? The ice, you're saying that you're chipping, where is that occurring?
So, the way I'm sorry, do I have to step by?
Yeah, please.
sorry.
That's okay.
I don't want to get too close either. With the way that the water runs.
From where to where?
On Linnet.
On Linnet.
So Linnet has a downslope to it.
Okay.
So like when we got the hailstorm back a few years ago.
Sure.
Like it actually flows down Linnet and it goes up over when we start getting a lot, it'll actually get a little river going through Linnet.
Got it.
And when it hits into actually the corner of my property, we're on the corner right there at 102nd, and Linnet.
Yep.
We're not on that map, so we would be
Sure.
across from number 2, basically.
Got it.
Then what happens is it backs up into our cul-de-sac, and the water, then in the winter when it gets cold enough to freeze, then there's like a whole ice dam all the way across the road where our cul-de-sac comes off of Linnet. There's like I'm sorry, I don't know the right word for it. There's a little
okay.
concrete thing that they made between the 2 roads, and that's where it fills in.
Got it.
And to be honest, the guy who has been doing our cul-de-sac in the wintertime has tried really, really hard the last few years. He comes out, he does try to keep it clear out.
Sure.
I mean, he's definitely working hard at it, but it's just
Sure.
not designed well, I think.
Okay. All right, so I was curious because when I was listening to her, I didn't quite catch the where, and I know we have the infiltration on the right-hand side. One of the questions I have, though, is with these new develops, with these new homes there, is there any concern, Scott, around where the runoff from those homes, where it's going to be directed? Does it get directed towards that infiltration basin, or does it get directed towards Linnet Street? Does it get directed towards the cul-de-sac? Just when she was expressing that, I just wondered if that was going to add any more water to the problem. That's what I was curious.
Yeah, Commissioner Smolke,
I'm sure
typically
so.
with the engineering review, they look at it and the drainage plan is set up such so it doesn't increase off-site runoff.
Perfect, okay.
That's one of the reasons they've got the infiltration basin here.
Exactly.
Most of the stuff, if it's in the yard, it infiltrates into the yard before it gets out to the street.
Thank you.
That's different in the winter with the snow melt.
Sure.
All bets are off when the ground is frozen.
Okay, and if I could ask just kind of clarify another question. We were talking about the clear cutting the lots and so forth, but if I'm not mistaken, it looks like we are trying to preserve a lot of the trees to the back of the lots, correct? To try and keep some of that still in place. To build homes, oftentimes you do have to take down trees, I get it, but you're trying to preserve as much as you can?
Correct.
Okay, and what was the other thing? I think that is, it for right now. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Casey and then Commissioner Geisler.
Oh, so Mr. Harlicker, those infiltration basins, are they typically lined with a liner, or are big boulders placed in there, or what is that depression? Is it have any bottom other than just the grass, or the fact that it is a depression? Is it lined?
It's a depression, and no, they typically don't line them because the intention is to let the water percolate back down into the ground.
Okay.
So they might put some a soil mix in there that helps that along.
Okay.
But it's not intended to hold water.
Okay. And so the grading on the property is designed to send it all back that direction?
Right.
Okay.
Kind of back along through here
Oh.
and into there.
Along the east. To the east, thank you.
And Commissioner Geisler.
Mr. Harlicker, when residential homes are developed, there is a requirement for some boulevard trees and other things like that to be put in. Is that correct?
Correct. 1 tree per lot. With a corner lot, they'll need 1 on Linnet and 1 on 102nd.
So 2 on the corner and 1 for each one
Yep.
of them? Okay, thank you very much.
Chair Schwartz.
Commissioner Knobloch.
I know that there is to be 5 lots, but 4 homes to be developed. I just want to clarify that to make sure I'm correct, that the existing home will stay, or is there going to be 5 new homes, or an existing home and 4 new homes?
Yeah. No, Commissioner Knobloch, yeah, the existing home will remain on Lot 1, so there'll be 4 new homes, in the subdivision.
Anyone else? Comments?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Schmolke.
I remember what my third question was. Mr. Harlicker, can you tell me what the trash guard is for? It's on Lot 5 there, right by the infiltration basin. What is that trash guard?
A what?
It says trash guard. I'm on I'm on page C4 of the, what's the document?
I'm not sure I see what you're talking about.
That's on the
It's
stormwater.
at
That's a
the
stormwater line.
It says
northeast
trash
corner
guard.
of
What does that
or the
mean?
northwest corner of the infiltration
Yeah.
basin.
Up here?
Can you?
So a trash guard is essentially a screen, so it prevents debris from flowing into.
Oh, sure.
that,
Okay,
okay.
got it.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
It's on the stormwater line.
Got it,
Okay,
thank you.
yes.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Thank you. All right, do we have anyone to make a motion?
I can get back to it, I'll make the motion.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Geisler.
I'll move approval in planning case 21-12 with the following conditions. All engineering comments be addressed. Park dedication in the amount of $10,000 be paid prior to releasing the plat for recording. And the applicant verify proof of ownership of Outlot A, Wooddale Estates, prior to releasing the plat for recording.
I'll second.
Motion by Geisler, second by Schmolke. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. This is a recommendation by the Planning Commission, and decision will be made by the City Council at their June 1st meeting. Thank you. All right, the second case is Planning Case 21-11, a conditional use permit. This is for a service business with office warehouse at 3050 Coon Rapids Blvd. NJR Seamless Gutters. Mr. Harlicker.
Yes, Chair and Commissioners. We have, again, another conditional use permit for this property. It's at the intersection of Coon Rapids Boulevard and 111th. This is the site here. What's being proposed in this space, the applicants would like to occupy 5,100 square feet in this multi-tenant building. They're asking for a service business with office warehouse. Currently, there is one other use in the building. It's a Fridley Auto Repair, which they have got a conditional use permit earlier this year. The fitness center that was originally approved for this space here is no longer going to be in that location, and that item is later on the agenda. The applicant has requested a revocation of that conditional use permit. So the NJR Gutters is located in this part of the building here between Fridley Auto Repair and where the fitness center was going to go. It's a two-story space. The first floor will be for storage. The second story will be their office space. It's a U-shaped office space with an open area in the center going down into the first floor. The applicant has 8 employees. They're generally open from 7 to 4 Monday through Friday. Customer contact is done via phone, so they don't get many customers coming into their business. Dumpsters. The property owner is going to have to work out with the applicants, both this one, the next one, the Humble Crew Auto Detailing, and any other occupants of the building, how they're going to organize garbage pickup. Right now, they've just got some dumpsters sitting outside without an enclosure. If they're going to put them outside, they need to be within an enclosure, and that enclosure would have to meet city code. Landscaping, back in 1981, you can see it on this photo here. They did get site plan approval, and there was landscaping along the 111th there on the Boulevard. Since that time, much of it has either died or been removed. So since these conditional use permits run with the property, staff is recommending that the landscaping along the boulevards be brought up into compliance with current code. Again, there's this was a condition of the fitness center. There's a chain link fence with barbed wire on top of it that will have to be removed. And then there's barbed wire across the back on top of the privacy fence that will also have to be removed as a condition of approval. There's parking available on this site, 67 spaces. The existing auto repair, the Fridley Auto Repair, is using 3 spaces. The parking requirement for this use is 10. And the applicant on their diagram here shows that they've got 7 allocated, so they need 3 additional spaces. The spaces here in front on this side of the building are allocated for the Fridley Auto Repair. With that, staff is recommending the commission approve the conditional use permit with the 5 conditions: compliance with city code, property owner designate the location of the required 10 parking spaces. They show 7, 10 must be provided. Any dumpster or recycling container must be stored inside or within an enclosure that is constructed to city standards. Landscaping must be brought into compliance with current landscape standards. And the chain link fence and barbed wire along the east and south sides of the site be removed. And the barbed wire on top of the privacy fence on the west side also be removed. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Harlicker. Commission, any questions for Mr. Harlicker on this case?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Geisler.
Mr. Harlicker, in condition 2, it states the applicant has identified, and then it says the property owner should designate. Should that be corrected to the applicant should designate?
Ultimately, I think Commissioner Geisler, the property owner, should come up with a parking plan. So that way, he's telling his tenants where their parking spaces are allocated, as opposed to each tenant trying to get the best spots they can. That way it'd be a more organized type of distribution of parking, I think.
So to an extent, the staff is looking for a comprehensive parking plan for this building based on what we're trying to do here?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Casey.
So, Mr. Harlicker, that item and then the landscaping renewal and the removal of the chain link fence and barbed wire, that'll all get communicated to the property owner, correct?
Yes, it will.
And that's their responsibility, not the service business that's
correct.
going in there. Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Schmucki.
Mr. Harlicker, is there a reason that the barbed wire hasn't been addressed already? We've brought that up a couple times already, and it doesn't seem to be
Commissioner
getting
Smolky,
addressed.
code technically allows applicants up to a year to bring the site into compliance
Okay.
with their conditions of approval. We're having ongoing conversations with the property owner, and now that it's nice, we can get them out there and hopefully get that fence taken down.
Okay. It does just concern me a little bit with the things that we want brought up current, right? The landscaping, the barbed wire, the parking issues. It just leaves me a little bit uneasy in terms of will those things actually be addressed? So if we approve this, and they have a year, right? But I know that there's a process in a year that if those things aren't met, but it just makes it a little uneasy. If we don't have more assurance that there is a plan, that there is, truly these things are going to be addressed.
I will express your
Thank you.
concerns to the property owner.
Anyone else questions for Mr. Harlicker? Mr. Harlicker, the building also had, or did have anyway, the store with the archery stuff. Are they out of business?
They
As far as you know?
relocated, Mr.
They've relocated,
Chair
okay.
Schwartz, yes.
Do we have a plan, for that space yet?
What they're gonna do with that space?
Yeah.
No, we do not. They are working with the building inspections. This is kind of how they see breaking it up. With this building here, 3 spaces in front of it. And then in the rear back here, you've got the Fridley Auto Supply, and then another space here. And then this space in front, I believe they're working with a retailer on some space in there. And then it looks like there's probably room for 2 other tenants up front along the boulevard.
Mr. Chair, could I?
It appears to me that we're running awful short of parking for the existing businesses, much less adding other businesses to the opening that are available.
Chair, yeah, that's why we've had 3 applicants come in, and to this point, they've got available spaces. They've got 67 spaces on site. They do own the adjacent property to the west there, the carpet store. And so they're going to do a cross-access and parking agreement with them. But yes, if they get a larger tenant that's going to go in there with a high parking demand, that's something that'll have to be looked at. It may be prohibitive for them to locate there because of the lack of parking.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, could I just
Mr. Fernelius.
clarify a point? So staff, I think, shares
several of the concerns that have been expressed by the commission this evening. I will say that 3 weeks ago, a month ago, Mr. Harlicker, myself, and a couple of other staff members actually did walk the site. We took a tour of the entire building, met with the property owner, expressed many of these same concerns about parking. You know, there are a number of conditional use permits, each of which has to be analyzed kind of independently. It's not an ideal situation. I think the reality of what we're kind of experiencing is the redevelopment of a building that once housed a single tenant, which has now been carved up into these multiple spaces. And we've asked the question about, is there a plan with regard to what kinds of tenants are you targeting? We want to make sure that these uses are compatible. We've provided the list of permitted uses. They understand what the conditional uses are. And so, you know, they've been marketing this site to multiple users, many of whom are conditional uses. And so we're in this situation, and our staff conversation has been that we feel, given the fact that we have a number of these conditional uses, each with different parking demands, that we want to utilize the tools that we have to apply appropriate conditions. So the items that Mr. Harlicker mentioned are sort of the kind of the exchanges that go on between city staff and the applicant to try and address some of the aesthetic considerations. But this is a challenge, and so I think we're doing the best we can under the circumstances to use the tools that we can. But this is kind of where we're at.
Thank you. And Mr. Harlicker, did the archery shop have a conditional use permit?
I don't recall. I think they did.
And if they're no longer in business, do we plan to bring that forward then to revoke that one as well?
I can check that out.
Thank you. Commission, any other questions? Mr. Heichler.
Mr. Harlicker, again, I'm not sure if this is an appropriate question or the right time to ask it, but has any thought been given by the city to perhaps, seems like a very good, very nice piece of property, like that the city could use it for, purchase it and use it for something other than 7 or 8 little buildings or businesses?
Yeah.
Like a city fire hall?
Mr. Chair, I can address that. Commissioner Heichler and commissioners. So the city did have conversations with the previous landowner who had actually approached the city with interest in selling the property. Unbeknownst to us, there were actually conversations going on with, I believe, the current buyer, which we didn't know about. And that wasn't disclosed to us, and so we did talk with the council sometime last year, and at that point in time, there was interest in possibly locating the new Fire Station 3, which has since been, we found a different spot for it. Council had directed staff to pursue negotiations for a potential acquisition for that fire station, and when we called, I don't mean to laugh, but when we called the representative the next day, we were told that they had it under contract with a different party. So long story short is we did have those conversations. We did attempt to acquire it. I can tell you 10 plus years ago, the city had attempted to acquire it for redevelopment purposes, and the council at that time was not interested in acquiring the property. So it's been on our radar, I'll tell you that.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this time? All right, we do need a public hearing on this matter, so at this time I will open a public hearing in planning case 21-11, conditional use permit for a service business with office warehouse at 3050 Coon Rapids Boulevard. Anyone wish to speak to this public hearing? Anyone wish to speak to this public hearing?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Bucciccone.
nobody on Zoom.
Thank you. Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing and contain comments to the council or the commission.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Schmolke.
I will make a motion, if there's no other comments. In planning case 21-11, the commission approved the proposed conditional use permit with the following conditions: that they're compliant with Title 11 City Code, that the applicant has identified 7 spaces, 10 spaces must be provided. The property owner designate the location of the required 10 parking spaces. Any dumpster or recycling container must be stored inside or within an enclosure that is constructed to city standards. That the landscaping must be brought into compliance with current landscaping standards. And the chain link fence and barbed wire along the east and south sides of the site be removed, and the barbed wire on top of the privacy fence on the west side of the site also be removed.
Chair Schwartz, I'll second that.
Motion by Schmolke, second by Knobloch. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, I just would like to reiterate what Councilman Schmolke talked about, getting some of these things done. You know, I know they have a year to do it, but it would be kind and nice if, I'll say again, kind of nice if they would take care of some of these issues and not let it go for a full year.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Geisler.
I'll also add to that, I am interested in a comprehensive parking plan, wherever that comes out to here. I mean, we're talking between 6 and 8 businesses on this property, which is quite a lot for the amount of land that's there. So I think we really do need to understand where this entire plan is going, because I would hate to see a third of this building go empty because there isn't enough parking, there isn't a way to serve the customers appropriately, if we're piecemealing our way through this. And that just won't serve the city well either, nor the landowner, to be unable to rent their property. So I am interested in seeing that from the landowner as well. Thank you.
Do we need to add any of that as a condition at all, that comprehensive parking plan, or?
Well, it's up to the motioner and seconder. We satisfied with existing motion?
We'll satisfy it with this one. It's fine.
All right. All right, no further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. This is a decision by the Planning Commission and can be appealed to the City Council within 10 days if someone so chooses. All right, our next case, Planning Case 21-14, a conditional use permit for an auto detailing business at 3050 Coon Rapids Boulevard, Humboldt Crew Detailing. Mr. Harlicker.
Yes, Chair and Commissioners, this is a very similar application. This is a Humboldt Crew, it's a detailing, automobile detailing business. They're looking to occupy 2,730 square feet at this location here. In the building, it sits right about here. There is an overhead door and a service door right here. That's how they would get the cars in. It's a single-story space as opposed to the 2 stories for the previous application. I'm going to do a small shop or office space, waiting area, and shop space. The applicant has 1 other employee, and they're generally open from 10 to 6 Monday through Saturday. Customers' cars will be stored inside until the customer arrives to pick it up. It's not like a typical automobile repair business where they fix them and stash them outside. Again, like the previous application, dumpsters and recycling must be placed in an enclosure or kept inside. Parking for this space, code doesn't have a parking requirement for this. but with 2 employees, and all cars will be parked inside until they are picked up. 6 parking spaces should be sufficient. And again, there's availability for about 12 spaces in front of this building here. Again, the property owner would have to show us where the spaces are. There are 3 in front of this building here, but those are being used by the Fridley Auto Repair. You've got these here along this bank here that'll be for the gutter applicant. So they could get 6 of them here, or possibly 6 over in this way here, and still be relative proximity to the business. Again, we've got the landscaping, the chain link fence issues, they all keep coming up with these conditional use permits. With that, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission approve the conditional use permit with the conditions that compliance with Title 11, the property owner designate the location of the required 6 parking spaces. Any dumpster or recycling container must be stored inside or within an enclosure that is constructed to city standards. Landscaping must be brought into compliance with current landscaping standards. And the chain link fence and barbed wire on the east and south sides be removed, as well as the barbed wire on top of the privacy fence on the west side be removed. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Herlicker. Commission, any questions from Mr. Herlicker?
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Casey?
So with this auto detailing business, Mr. Herlicker, in the narrative that the applicant provided, so there will be painting going on in this building? Aftermarket automotive paint work. And I'm just wondering, are ventilation conditions suitable for that kind of a business?
Yes, Commissioner Casey. Depends on the extent of the detailing. Are they doing, how I picture that is they're fixing scratches and things like that. Full-blown body work, that's not allowed.
That's not
in
a
the Port
permitted
District.
use.
Correct. So how I envisioned this was more of the fixing scratches, key marks, things of that nature.
I see. So it's very small painting
Right.
going on, and then,
Yeah, they will have to get the appropriate building permits, and any sort of ventilation issues will be addressed through the building permitting process.
and that's with the applicant, not the property owner? Or does that involve
Again,
both?
it's right now, the way they're handling it is the property owner it's haphazard is the way to do
Okay.
it. We're trying to get the property owner to pull the building permits and be responsible for that. He's saying that, well, I'd like to have the future tenants do it, so it's kind of going back and forth between them and the building official and the building inspections department.
Chair Schwartz?
Commissioner Knobloch?
The question I was kind of holding back on asking, but since Commissioner Casey kind of opened that door. My question is, in regards to what I've been rereading over the recommendations, and as you've said, there's a lot of similarity with the previous conditional use permit. My concern is that perhaps that the recommendations could in the future maybe be more specific, saying what responsibilities are by the applicant versus, because I understand the property owner or the applicant, I would like to see, I don't know if it's relative, but I'd like to see the wording specify, for example, the landscaping must be brought into compliance with the current landscaping standards by the property owner slash
Okay.
applicant. Just to clarify it, because that gray area, you know, since the conditional use permit is kind of tied to the business, the landowner or the property owner is, as we know, is primarily responsible since they're the owner and they're leasing out to a tenant. So that's my only request or opinion.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Geisler?
Just a question for staff. So when a conditional use permit is issued, it's attached to the property number, correct? Not the specific applicant?
Correct. Goes with the property.
So it will stay attached to the address here with the floor plan as we've seen it tonight?
Correct. Humble Crew could vacate that space and George's Auto Detailing could go in under that conditional use permit.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Mr. Harlicker and possibly Mr. Bucciccone, is there any possibility that the commission could hold off on these conditional uses permits until the property owner brought the property up to compliance? In other words, the landscaping, we're talking about the parking lot needs repair, we're talking about fencing and barbed wire needing to be removed. And none of these are really conditions that an individual tenant should be responsible for. Is it possible to withhold our conditional uses until these conditions are met?
I'll have to defer the answering to that question.
So, Mr. Chair, I think how it would affect your vote is upon the things we talk about in the conditional use permit itself. So by its nature, that last agenda item, you told the property owner you have to get those things fixed, or this conditional use permit is invalid. And so therefore, should the conditional use permit be utilized, there are resources available to the city to enforce the conditions you talked about in those, the conditions of approval. With respect to this specific agenda item, as the barbed wire speaks to it's the design, right? The no under the use shall preserve and incorporate the site's important natural features into the developmental design. The commission could view that criteria as not satisfied given the state of the property, but it wasn't before.
Well, using that argument, we had the same conditions back on the fitness center, which obviously, granted, they never went in, but it was approved months ago. We had the same conditions on the Freddie Auto Repair that's moved in and is doing business. We're not seeing any upkeep to the parking lot. We're not seeing any fences or barbed wire removed. We're not seeing parking areas designated. We're not seeing trash receptacles built to city standards. It seems like we're making these conditions for all these businesses, allowing the businesses to come in, and then we've got a property owner that's basically saying the heck with the city.
Mr. Chair, maybe if I could.
Commissioner Schmolke.
Sorry, thank you. So is it that we're not being specific enough? Is kind of are we not being specific enough? So for example, on the designation of the parking spaces, and it's just a pain point with me, but I do agree, I feel like we're gonna be, you know, we're gonna run out of parking spaces pretty soon here, right? I just wonder if we're not being specific enough to say that we need that comprehensive parking plan that includes, right, the designated parking for each planned business, right, to ensure that there's adequate parking for, you know, the plans of development. Are we saying that, you know, do we need to be more specific? And I know that there's rules around how long they have to comply with certain things, but do we need to set some dates in here so that it's clear? Are there other things that we need to be just more specific around the conditions that we're asking? Because otherwise it does feel like it's just politeness, we're asking them to kindly, bring the trash, into compliance. I mean, things like the trash, the parking, those types of things feel like those should be more immediate. The landscaping, I can understand that can be, take some time. The fencing seems to be something I think should be addressed sooner. I don't know if we have that right to impose a particular deadline, but I don't know. And maybe we just really haven't given the property owner the time to reasonably react to all of the conditions. So maybe that's something that needs to be shared back with us as well. Maybe we're just, because we don't see anything happening, maybe there are plans that the property owner is actually working on, but we don't know. And it just feels like it's being kind of, pushed along with each, CUP that we're getting. So I don't know. That's my question back to you guys, I guess.
I can speak to the specificity
Okay.
portion. I do not think the directives have lacked in specificity.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, Commissioner Schmolke, if I can just address that. So, I mean, I do think if you look back on the history of the conditional use permits in the last, whatever it's been, year, 15 months, 16 months, I think it's evolved. And I think, that has been our frustration, and we've expressed that to the landowner, that just because you can apply for a conditional use permit doesn't mean you can fill that building up with 10 different conditional uses. The city has the ability to apply conditions. The city has the ability to say, you know what, there's these conditional uses in totality are not compatible, whether it's the parking demand or some other characteristic of those uses. The pushback that we've gotten from the applicant is that, well, they essentially have the right to apply for these things. And so, it has been very piecemeal. And so those original conditions that we applied, as Chair Schwartz kind of outlined, it really was the tool or the conditions that we had at the time. We've since, I think, tried to apply some additional conditions. The challenge, of course, I think, as Mr. Bucciconi pointed out, is they've provided specificity, but I don't know that we can, with this particular application, all of a sudden pile on a bunch of additional conditions just because we kind of missed our opportunity to do that previously. I think had we had the foresight of what we might end up with, maybe there would have been an opportunity to do that, but we can't compel them. I mean, they have the right to apply for a conditional use permit. We have to, in an ideal scenario, we'd be talking about the whole building, but the way that they've approached this is they're breaking it up into individual spaces, and we're dealing with what comes our way. This is not an ideal situation, and I will say this is highly unusual in my career. I don't know that I've seen this many conditional uses in a particular location, but it's kind of where we're at. And so we're trying to leverage what we can with the conditions that we've applied. So.
Yeah, I do think it is something, we did raise exactly what you said. When this first came around, we were talking about the parking, right? We raised that as, this is our concern, the more CUPs that are brought forward, the parking locations are gonna get crunched, right? These other things are soft, right? They're not, explicit, and as each one comes up, how do we ensure? So here we are, how many CUPs later, and we kind of just feel like this is where it hasn't improved, right? Now, I'm really excited that you guys have been having the meetings with them. That is actually gives me some reassurance that at least the city is, or the staff is trying to work with the owner to make sure that these things are done. I think it's like in the future, I don't know if there's a way that we can find a way to say when something like this comes up, when we're asking for a holistic plan, we get that, right? Because I think this is where we find ourselves if we don't have a tool to be able to require that, right? So we make a a good educated decision. These piecemeals, I don't think are doing the city a favor or the tenants, right? Or the property owner eventually, right? Because he could find himself in a situation where there isn't a business that he can move into the space because there's no more parking, you know? But we've been approving them, so now he's in a, or he or she is in a position, can't continue to, you know, develop it, so now what? So there's many people that can be, you know, affected by this, but those holistic plans, I think, are important.
Chair Schwartz.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Are you going to respond to that?
Chair Schwartz and Commissioner, what I was going to say is, you know, we have emphasized that point several times with the owner. And they're aware of our concerns, and, you know, we've explained that you could find yourself in a situation where one conditional use take, for example, the event center, that demands a lot of parking. And, you know, you have a limited amount of parking in this location, you could be using up a lot of it for that. That particular event center, I believe, was designed to, you know, most of its use would be certain times of the day, maybe on weekends, but you could find yourself in a situation where you're not going to have enough parking. We've expressed that concern. The other comment that I'll make is with, you know, the other tools that we have been exercising or using, which is, you know, building permits are required. In situations where we find something unsafe or dangerous, we have the ability, our building official can red tag it. I don't know that that's happened in this particular location, but we've run into situations where we can red tag something. He can basically order, you know, contractors out of that space if it's not safe. So it's obviously much better if they cooperate, and we've certainly been trying to encourage them to do that. But it is frustrating, I will agree.
Well, it's not
Mr. Chair?
site-specific. Along those same lines, would we be able to tell the property owner that we're red tagging or whatever the barbed wire and fencing, and until he gets that gone, there's no more action to be done on the property?
I think that's a bit of apples and oranges. You know, I think the barbed wire was allowed under our code. I don't know that that's a building code issue. So we've established that condition already, and I don't know how far back removal of the barbed wire went. If that should have been removed by now, I guess we can have a conversation with the owner and say that needs to be removed.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. That was I believe that was a previous condition of approval. So, you know, part of it is we can go back to the owner and, you know, look at what those conditions were and make sure that they're meeting them. But I don't think we can use the power of the building official to do that. That was a zoning condition, and so we have to use our zoning authority to exercise that.
Mr. Chair Schwartz. Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Heikler?
I'm not sure if I missed it in your summation there, but at what point can we say, or go to the property owner and he can apply a new conditional use permit, and we can just say, you can go ahead and apply for it, but guess what? Our planning commission will not approve it. And if you kind of squeeze a little bit.
Isn't part of the problem there, though? It's not the property owner that's getting the conditional use permit.
Right.
It's the applicant,
Yeah.
not the property.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Buccicconi?
we can't speak for what the planning commission will do.
Right.
What I think happens by the nature of you all talking about it, obviously, you're expressing your views. The applicant should be watching. The property owner should be watching, taking note. With respect to non-conformance, there are things we can address through building permitting, like Mr. Fenelius addressed, and there's the administrative citation process that we can also utilize. And that's an enforcement mechanism that we can choose to use, and sometimes we do. And that's a mechanism that sometimes we don't choose to use it. I think that's all I had.
Mr.
Chair Schwartz.
Commissioner Geisler.
Question for Mr. Bucciccone. We have previously put a timestamp or a date on a requirement before. Is it within reason or legally allowed for us to say before the applicant or the applicant can occupy the space that these conditions be met?
Reasonable, I don't know. That's for you all to figure out. Legally, I think if there were a specific condition that you wanted prioritized, you could say prior to an occupant being allowed to be in the building, barbed wire needs to be removed, or something of that nature. I would say that's a slippery slope because our building permit folks, our engineering folks, they have a normal process that they follow. So if you wanted something prioritized, you could certainly utilize that as part of the conditions, but just keep that in mind. Legally speaking.
Yes, legally speaking, yes. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Bradley.
I'm sorry, I'll speak after Commissioner Bradley.
I just wanted to address this to Mr. Buccione, and ask if he would agree that the commission's role is kind of defined by the statute and guidelines, and based on, the application, recommendation of staff, information provided by the applicant, and that the enforcement isn't, and we can set conditions, but the enforcement portion is really part of the city staff purview and not the planning commission, and that we should rely on staff to follow the process to do the enforcement, and that we shouldn't, I'm a little worried about the slippery slope, and that we get ourselves into a position that could be difficult for the city if we push too far.
So I'll address the sort of separation of powers, for lack of a better term. Mr. Chair, Commissioner Bradley, you're exactly correct, that the city staff, we choose what to enforce and when to enforce it, much like a police officer choosing whether or not to give a speeding ticket to somebody going 5 miles an hour over the speed limit.
Thank you.
Mr. Fernelius.
Mr. Chair, I was going to ask, and this is I don't mean to put my colleague on the spot, but for Mr. Harlicker, so was there a previous conditional use permit on this property for the auto business that's there, Fridley Auto?
Yes.
We did, and was there a condition related to for example, the barbed wire?
Yes.
Yes.
Do we know when?
I believe their condition included the barbed wire on the back side,
Okay.
on top of the
And then the fitness center
privacy
also
fence.
had that same issue,
Okay.
but for the other part of it.
And the fitness center, we're revoking that tonight, or I mean, that's on the agenda tonight. As it relates to the other conditional use permit that's still valid, what was the time frame on that? Do we remember?
It was December of
Dece-
2020 that we
Okay.
enacted it, I believe.
So there was still theoretically, I guess, there was still a time frame. Where I was going with this, of course, is if there was a condition with a prior approval that had lapsed or been in violation, I think there would be an ability for staff to then have a conversation with the owner. Look, you've already got an issue, right? You're not in compliance. But if they're still within that window, I don't know that we can use that mechanism of, for example, revoking a special use permit because they haven't met a condition. So I guess we don't have that option at this point.
Right.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Bucciccone.
a little out of my role here, but I wanted the commission to know that the barbed wire is a topic of conversation in my department at the very least. We've had a conversation in our department about finding ways to make sure the barbed wire is gone.
Okay.
And so I want the staff is well aware of these issues that we've talked about. And we're doing our best to stay on top of it.
Chair Schwartz.
Commissioner Knobloch.
Thank you. I agree with your earlier comments, Chair Schwartz and Commissioner Schmolke. I agree with your comments. Thank you. Commissioner Bradley, I respectfully disagree with your comments. And what I want to say is, I think we're in the situation where the Planning Commission has certain tools and powers, and we get to review them, and we're an advisory council, and our opinion and input goes to City Council. They have the power to decide on our recommendations or not. So therefore, I would say, instead of passing the buck in a clear situation where we should recommend to the City Council that these conditional permits are conditional use permits should not even be addressed, that that we should make the decision and the input as it goes to City Council, that these conditional use permits should not move forward, as Commissioner Smolke and yourself said, you implied anyway, that these conditions should be met before we pursue on. And I think that would alleviate the issue of waiting a year and seeing an owner not complying and then forcing the city departments that are applicable to it to have to enforce it or be the policemen or the enforcers. So I think that would alleviate the situation that we're spending time discussing on. And if we as a commission, planning commission, make that, decide that is the direction we want to recommend to the City Council, they have the final say if that's something they agree or disagree with our input. So I agree with a lot of what's been said, but I think we should take it the next step further. And that is something that will provide immediate results and reduce a lot of situations that I think we're going to experience more with this property as time goes forward. And this is a prime example of this situation that will continue to blossom into other properties and other applications. So I recommend to the council and to the chair that we should make a recommendation, not to disrespect the planning commission because they have certain tools and powers, but we have as well. So I think we should make the recommendation to, if this is to be approved, that all these conditions must be met, and then let it go to the City Council and see what their elected, because we're appointed, what they're elected, what they're willing to stand behind. Final word.
The problem I see with that, however, is this particular case and conditional use permits in general are decisions by this body and don't go to the council.
Good point.
Unless it's appealed.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Schmolke.
I do have one quick clarifying question. So the barbed wire, as an example, the barbed wire, it was a condition of the petition that was brought to us in December. I guess I didn't remember that it was only for a section. I do remember us having the conversation about the whole area having it, so I don't remember that it was just a small area we were requiring at that time to be removed. So if that's the case, that's fine. But the question I have is, since with each of these conditional use permits, we keep bringing up these same items, with every conditional use permit that we are granting, are we extending that deadline? So by adding it to each of them, so now today, right, if hypothetically, if the whole barbed wire had originally been introduced in December, and we continue to bring it up with each conditional use permit, are we in effect then giving added time for them to be able to respond?
I like that question.
Yeah, there you go.
Great question. Let's see if I can say it clearly enough. So for the auto detailing business, the conditions attached to that cannot be extended unless some action is taken specific to that application and agenda item. So
Okay.
you're not extending it with respect to that conditional use permit, but with respect to the conditional use permit you considered already today, it's a year from today
Yeah.
for that permit. So with respect specifically to the barbed wire, whenever it was first addressed, that's the conditional use permit that's running
Okay,
and could be at issue should that condition not be addressed. And as time, if that year lapses and we start getting into a year on the next one and the next, you get the idea.
sure. Okay, so the city would still be able to take action on the first year anniversary, if that was the deadline, right? And then, or the timeframe that they had to act to it, but if they don't, there is additional CUPs that you then act upon to further try to enforce.
We could.
Yes, you could. Got
Yes.
it. That's the tool. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Goetz?
just to clarify the information, that was 21-2 was for Fridley Auto Repair. That was in January. And the condition states that it was for the west side of the building, so it's a little more ambiguous, but not as specific as the ones we're looking at. So just clarifying that point. To Commissioner Knobloch's conversation, I'm having a little bit of an issue with the fact that we just approved one and now we're hanging on this one. You know, from a procedural standpoint, I do believe that the site is currently not in conformance without the conditions as it sits. We could deny this conditional use permit and they could appeal it, is my understanding of the process. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so, while we have approved one today, I would have a hard time convincing myself to say yes to one and no to the other in the same meeting. However, I think if there were more ones coming in and we were still seeing that the site was not remediated, we could absolutely have a conversation about that as a commission of the validity of any further conditional use permits. That would be my inclination tonight and where I'm thinking about this site and what its future holds. I think it's pretty clear what we're looking for. I think the property owner knows what we want. I think the property owner knows what staff wants. So that's kind of where I'm at, sitting here with looking at these conditional use permits and what we've already done tonight and what we've got in front of us now.
Mr. Harlicker, a question. Do you have any idea when we approved the fitness center conditional use permit?
I believe it was December of last year. It was the last application of 2020.
Yeah,
So
I
it
think
probably
it
got
was.
approved in December,
Yeah.
possibly January of this year.
And so that would have been the first conditional use permit on this property,
Correct.
taking away what might or might not have been with the archery center.
Correct.
Is it possible to, thinking ahead to our case number 6, the revocation of the conditional use permit, would it be possible for us to deny the revocation, to keep it in effect so that the year continues to go on that conditional use permit?
I think they'd have to have findings as to why you won't deny it at the request of the property owner. The reasoning for it, you know, why aren't you approving their request?
And along those same lines, who brought the revocation for that permit?
The property owner did.
Then likewise, could we make date-specific periods when conditions would have to be met for this case?
I'm looking over there. I believe they can. The code says a maximum of 1 year.
But we could set a date less than a year. And then they would have to appeal that if they weren't happy with it?
Chair Schwartz, it depends. Unfortunately, it's that answer. The 12 months for the entire CUP, I don't think you can alter that time frame. With respect to a specific condition, It's much like what I talked with Commissioner Geisler there about if you would like something prioritized, you could certainly do that. I don't think you can change the length of the time they have to comply in total with everything in the CUP. That's by ordinance and by state statute.
Well, for example, on this case, we're talking again about the chain link fence and barbed wire. We have to give them a year for that, or we can set a specific date that they must have it.
I would
moved by.
hesitate to set a specific date. I would say that the commission could probably set a specific date, but I think the better path would be to say that be removed before X, Y, or Z event occurs. Because much like with the fitness center that didn't happen, we might be back here then before X date, if we set a date, revoking that conditional use permit simply because the property owner does not wish to comply with the barbed wire condition.
All right, then likewise, in the notes, it's talked about the parking lot is in need of repair. The applicant should repair, resurface, and restripe the parking lot as needed. I would at least make that condition number 6, so that we have an official condition that has to be met, and gives them a clock on when to do that.
Was that not a condition?
It's not listed as a condition. The parking lot has got.
No, but when we did the fitness center, was that not a condition?
Well, but now we're gonna be revoking the fitness center tonight, so.
Oh, it was on the fitness center one, okay,
And it was just to stripe the parking, not necessarily repair.
correct.
But now we're saying it's in need of repair, and it needs to be repaired, resurfaced, and restriped. So I would make that as condition number 6. That the parking lot be repaired, resurfaced, and restriped.
Could I just make one comment? So that's on, you're attaching it to this humble crew detailing CUP, but we didn't do anything with the seamless gutter CUP.
No,
We
but
haven't
they'll have the same effective date and the same expiration date.
Are we penalizing one and not the other?
Well, it's still gonna fall on the property owner.
True,
Mr. Chair.
I just think that caught in the middle are these two applicants who are wanting to do nothing but do business.
Maybe to clarify Commissioner Casey's
Yeah.
point, if there's a burdensome condition on one of them, they could choose not to lease it to that person, vacate it, and reissue, is, I think, the thing that could happen that we wouldn't want to see. By having not the same conditions on every single CUP going forward. So I share your concern there of not being consistent
Right.
on that, and
I don't think we can single out this last applicant tonight. And, but going forward, we've talked about some options and some leverage that we might have, but I don't think we can penalize this particular applicant.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Schmolke.
I think it's probably wise for us to add, if revoking the other CUP tonight is going to remove that parking lot repair, I would agree, we should probably add it to this one. It is on the same clock. It is something that needs to be repaired. I do think very strongly that I think the staff has heard our concerns. It's been echoed back to us, right? It does sound like there is work that is being done to work with this property owner. I really kind of feel, rather than putting us imposing deadlines, timelines, things like that on these CUPs, I feel like we should allow staff the opportunity. This is unique in that we're in this situation because it is multiple CUPs. We predicted it, here's where we are. They've heard us, so maybe now we just go ahead and with the approval, cite the conditions, add the parking lot, And again, allow staff to do their job. That's kind of my opinion.
And Mr. Harlicker, can we request either that the council, well, no, never mind, on that thought, we've got how many other empty properties within this property? We got the fitness center.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spaces maybe.
Can we make some kind of requirement that we will, to the property owner, that he knows that she knows that we will not consider any further conditional use permits till all of these conditions that we've brought up have come into compliance?
Mr. Harlicker.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Chair Schwartz, by expressing that thought, you're certainly sending a message. I think the legal answer is a person can apply for a conditional use permit and it comes before this body. What you do with it, however, once it comes here, is up to you.
And could the council create a moratorium on conditional use permits on a specific property, or would it have to be citywide?
When we start talking about possibilities, that gets really difficult for me to answer, but I think your question in and of itself sends a message.
Pardon me?
Your question in and of itself sends a very clear message. I don't know the legal answer to that.
I'm sorry.
Could they try? Probably. Would it be a dangerous legal ground to do to one specific property, say you're not allowed to apply for conditional use permits?
Well, until all these conditions that you previously have not met are met.
So, legally speaking, they could probably try to do that. Our advice, I would have to talk to Mr. Brody about what our advice to the council would be about that, if they chose to do that. I would tell you, Chair Schwartz, you guys have very valid concerns about enforcement mechanisms. We have some available to us, even without the conditional use permit process. And we're working with the property owner, all of our departments. Mine hasn't become involved yet. And frankly, that's because when we do become involved, things tend to get expensive. We're working with the property owner is the best way I would say that. We have enforcement tools available to us. I'm going to talk to Mr. Brody maybe even tonight about some of the concerns you've raised and what legal remedies we have available to us. I'll certainly speak with him tomorrow. So.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, one closing comment on that is just, I would hesitate to impose the suggestion you just made, only because depending upon the CUP coming to us, I wouldn't say that with the next CUP that I would be rejecting it. And maybe I would be in favor of it. I don't know. So until it's brought forward, I don't want to make that blanket decision for myself, just speaking for myself.
Chair Schwartz.
Commissioner Noberg.
I just wish to make to the entire commission, this is an opportunity to enforce a principle as us as a body, as we're advising the council. And there were a lot of wonderful, excellent points made legally and also planning commission and how things work and such. But I think when I look at my duty, and I think Chair Schwartz, you said it well, there's certain requirements, and with the fencing, with the barbed wire, with the, we've seen in other situations where some of these things have been sunsetted and they've been going on for years, and I won't mention those properties. But I think this is an opportunity, a principle, and I will not be voting for this conditional. I don't care that it affects what I did on the previous one. It's a principle going forward. It's not identifying this property. It's the situation of these conditional use permits that we need to put some teeth and enforcement and follow a principle that these are issues for me personally is not following the rules and the principles that we as a city are trying to operate under. And also, like with barbed wire and other situations, it's a safety issue. So I don't feel good voting for this conditional use, and I will not be voting for it in the current form that it is. So.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Geisler.
Question just for staff, whoever wants to field it. With respect to the parking lot and its state of disrepair, the city also has enforcement mechanisms to manage properties in disrepair, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
So maybe we don't need to add it.
That would be my inclination, yes.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Schwanke.
I will make a motion to approve the proposed conditional use permit with the following conditions. Compliance with Title 11 City Code, that the property owner designate the location of the required 6 parking spaces. Any dumpster or recycling container must be stored inside or within an enclosure that is constructed to city standards. The landscaping must be brought into compliance with the current landscaping standards, and the chain link fence and barbed wire along the east and south sides of the site be removed, and the barbed wire on top of the privacy fence on the west side of the site also be removed. And are we in agreement about wanting to add the parking lot updates, or are we going to leave that to the last suggestion?
I don't think we
say include
should. I don't think we should add that and separate it from the prior one we did tonight. That's just my opinion.
I'm tending to agree. Chair Schwartz, I'm not trying to go against you by any means. I
I'm
don't want to
sorry I
contradict.
interrupted.
But I kind of feel like it should be somewhat consistent, and, but I'm willing to hear comments on it. If there is a mechanism for them to, you know, go through the standards for the parking, I would let the city do that, since that's what we're asking them to do in totality here anyway.
We
So I
can
don't know
finish-
that we need
can
to.
finish the motion and amend it if we want to. So
Correct.
Let's just.
I'd second the motion.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion by Schmoke, second by Bradley. Any further discussion? Well, I personally feel that we should include the parking lot. It's not going to keep the detailing company specifically from going into the facility, but it gives definite notice to the property owner that it needs to be repaired.
I disagree. I think it singles out this particular applicant with one more added condition. And I think if the property owner isn't getting the message by now, these things need to be corrected. And I'll kind of draw that line in the sand going forward, that want to see some more action. But on this planning case 21-14, I'm satisfied with the motion as made and seconded.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Geisler.
I would concur with Commissioner Casey on this one. I could say that if I saw another finding of fact that showed the property still in disrepair, I would be very hesitant to review any further actions, as it doesn't seem to indicate a desire to remediate the property or issues that are there. However, with nothing in front of us today, beyond what we're talking about right now, I would agree that the current motion is reasonable and consistent with what we've done before, earlier today, and also previously for the auto repair in January.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Heikkinen.
These 4 wise people have convinced me that we should go ahead and approve this. And I think the property owner, if they watch this meeting or whatever, will have gotten the message that we are concerned and that we mean that they should get some of these issues brought up to code. So I will vote for this.
Anyone else? All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Motion carries with Commissioners Knobloch and Schwartz opposed. And this is the decision by the Planning Commission, can be appealed to the City Council within 10 days if they so choose. Mr. Harlicker, is it, or Mr. Bucciaconi, is it appropriate or not to make a comment as far as future cases on this property?
Mr. Chair, that would be not advisable legally.
All right. All right, we'll move on to the next case, planning case 21-16. A zone change to change the zoning from office low-density residential to moderate-density residential at 1575 Coon Rapids Boulevard, SMC Real Estate. Mr. Harlicker.
Yeah, Chair and Commissioners, we've got, again, we've got 2 items number 5 and number 4 that go together. One is a proposed land use amendment, and the other is a corresponding zone change. What's being requested is the property at 1575, highlighted here. The land use and zoning be changed to moderate density residential. Coon Rapids Boulevard in front here. Flamingo Street is the cul-de-sac, and this is Egret Boulevard at this point here. This is where the new Caribou coffee shop is located. Currently, the land use for this parcel is split. You've got commercial mixed use in the front with low density residential in the back. And zoning, it's zoned office in the front and low density LDR2 in the back. Surrounding land uses, you've got an office space here and single family residential behind it, and with an office building over on this side of the site. Site is 1.81 acres, and it's been split zone and split land use for quite some time. Property has access to Coon Rapids Boulevard. That's where the main frontage is. There's regularly scheduled transit that goes up and down the boulevard. When compared to the Coon Rapids Boulevard Framework Plan, that plan includes recommendations to encourage rezoning office parcels when residential development is proposed, as opposed to using use flexibility. And the proposed rezoning, as well as the proposed land use, is consistent with that developmental property, or that developmental principle. Outside the port districts, the framework plan identified it as being more of a focus for residential and trying to concentrate commercial development at the intersections where the port districts are. A comprehensive plan also states that areas between the ports are planned primarily for moderate density residential, and both the proposed rezoning and land use plan amendment are consistent with the Coon Rapids Boulevard Framework Plan and the 2040 Comprehensive Plan. With that, staff is recommending approval of the rezoning as well as the proposed land use plan amendment with findings contained in the staff report. Staff would recommend that the commission make separate findings for each item. With that, I'll answer any questions. I believe the applicants are in the audience also.
All right, thank you. Mr. Harley, or any questions? from the
Chair
commission?
Schwartz.
Commissioner Knobloch.
On the schematic that you have up on the northwest corner, is there not an access road that kind of comes right to the borderline there?
This?
Yeah, it's right where the indentation between the green and the gray is. I believe there is a street. Do you know the name of that street?
That is Flamingo Street.
Flamingo Street,
Yep.
okay.
And it's really, staff's preferred access to the site is from Coon Rapids Boulevard. To come in through Flamingo, you'd actually have to loop around back through a residential district and then come down the cul-de-sac to get to it.
And a second question, or the follow-up question, is with the zone change, so hypothetically, townhomes, or maybe not townhomes, or single-family dwellings could go into that green shaded area that you showed?
Under the current land use and zoning, yes, it could.
Okay, so then
It would
an
be very
access
difficult
road.
because it's landlocked.
Yeah, so.
And
but
we
there-
struggled with, this was a conversation we had with the applicant, how best to go about doing this. We came to the conclusion that the best way to handle it is to have a unified zoning and land use on the property.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Geisler.
So just to clarify, Mr. Harlicker, there is frontage on both Coon Rapids Boulevard and Flamingo Street for this property.
Correct.
Thank you.
Commission, any other questions for Mr. Harlicker?
I'm kind of wondering, Mr. Harlicker, about that small section in the bottom right corner of that parking lot. Has that, I mean, I'm assuming that whoever's going to build there does now own that section of the parking lot, or was there another building there at one time, or
Commissioner Heitel, no, there was never a building on this site.
just a parking lot?
That parking lot just kind of evolved over time. And to some extent, it's used by the office building. You know, they park here instead of parking on the improved parking lot on the back of the site. I believe it's the applicant's intention that should the land use plan amendment and zone change get approved, development of this site would include the elimination of that parking lot.
Any other questions for Mr. Harlicker? Is there anything the petitioner would like to add?
No comments. We're comfortable with staff recommendations.
Thank you. All right, we do need a public hearing on this matter, so at this time I will open a public hearing in planning case 21-16, a zone change to change the zoning from office low-density residential 2 to moderate-density residential at 1575 Coon Rapids Boulevard, SMC Real Estate. Anyone present wish to speak at this public hearing? Please state your name and address for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please.
My name is Jenny Tedrow. I'm at 10221 Flamingo Street. We are currently the only home that has access to that cul-de-sac, so it's our driveway. And I just want to encourage the city to stick with the plan for exit onto Coon Rapids Boulevard, because between our driveway and the land that they have, there is the high power lines right there. So the amount of space onto the cul-de-sac on Flamingo Street is incredibly small, and it would literally be next to my driveway, just with the space with the power lines. So just encouraging you. Thank you.
Well, just so you understand, tonight we're taking care of the zone change and land use. What you're concerned about would be coming up at the site plan discussion.
Okay, thank you.
And you will get the same notification when the development proposal comes forward.
We were here 13 years ago doing the same things.
Okay.
David Tedrow, also at 10221 Flamingo Street, and it was more like 17 years ago, I think. But my big concern with development in that area, because I know we're not talking about a specific plan at the moment, was adequate fire department access in case they had to get a fire engine back there. That was one of the main reasons it got rejected the last time, and I just want to make sure that that's all taken into account, just for everybody's safety.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak at the public hearing? Anyone wish to speak? Mr. Bucciacone, anybody on Zoom?
Goodness. No. They're here for the apartment building.
Okay, thank you. All right, at this time, we will close the public hearing and contain comments to just the commission. Commission, thoughts?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Casey.
without any further comments, I will make a motion. In planning case 21-16, I recommend that we approve the proposed zone change based on the following. The proposed rezoning to moderate density residential is consistent with the proposed land use designation of moderate density residential. Number 2, the proposed rezoning is compatible with the adjacent land uses and zoning. Number 3, the proposed rezoning corrects a mistake that resulted in a split zoning of the property. Number 4, the proposed zone change would not have an adverse impact on the area. Number 5, the proposed rezoning is consistent with development principles in the 2010 Coon Rapids Boulevard Framework Plan and the comprehensive plan's redevelopment guidelines for the area between the ports.
Second.
Motion by Casey, second by Geisler. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. This is a recommendation by the Planning Commission and will be introduced by City Council at their June 1st meeting. Next, we have the sister plan for this, and that's the land use amendment, planning case 21-15, land use amendment from commercial mixed use low density residential to moderate density residential, 1575 Coon Rapids Boulevard, SMC Real Estate. Mr. Harlicker, anything you need to add for the land use?
No, Chair, I don't have anything to add.
All right. Commission, any questions on the land use? All right, we do need...
Chair Schwartz,
Commissioner Knobloch?
I just want to make one comment in conscience that I want to say is one issue moving forward when we look at this. I can foresee, and this is just an opinion perspective, that prime real estate, that access from Coon Rapids Boulevard is not a viable long-term strategy, that I think a business will eventually go in there for that frontage. And then I think access from Flamingo is the long-term designation, what's going to happen, and I have some concerns about that. So, and if I were building a home or wanting to buy a home in such a narrow area, and if I had kids or whatever, I'd want to have access from Flamingo, and I think that would be a tremendous selling feature to have access from Flamingo. So that I have a concern with, and I don't see you can count just because it's the same lot of having consistent access from Coon Rapids Boulevard going forward into the future. So I just want to make that comment as something to consider, to think about moving forward on this parcel. But I do agree with the land use, but how that land is going to be used going forward in the future is of concern to me. That's all.
All right, thank you. We do need a public hearing in this matter, so at this time I will open a public hearing in planning case 21-15, land use amendment from commercial mixed use, low-density residential to moderate-density residential at 1575 Coon Rapids Boulevard, SMC Real Estate. Anyone present wish to speak? Anyone wish to speak? And no one on Zoom?
No one on Zoom.
Thank you. At this time, we'll close the public hearing, contain comments to the commission.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Schmolke.
In planning case 21-15, the Planning Commission recommends approval of the proposed land use amendment based on the following: that the proposed comprehensive land use amendment is compatible with the adjacent comprehensive land use designation and land uses. The proposed comprehensive land use amendment is supportive of the 2010 Coon Rapids Boulevard Framework Plan, and that the plan includes recommendations to encourage rezoning office parcels when residential development is proposed. The proposed land use amendment will support the rezoning and is consistent with the development principle to encourage commercial properties outside of the port districts to be redeveloped with compatible residential uses. And the proposed amendment is supportive of the comprehensive land use plan, and that the 2040 comprehensive plan states that areas along Coon Rapids Boulevard in between ports are planned for primarily moderate density residential development. The proposed land use amendment is consistent with the comprehensive land use plan's recommendation for development along Coon Rapids Boulevard.
Second.
Motion by Schmolke, second by Geisler. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion, excuse me, motion carries.
Sorry.
Recommendation by the Planning Commission with decision by the City Council at their June 15th meeting. Our next case is planning case 2016, revocation of a conditional use, just revocation of a conditional use permit. Planning case 2016 at 3050 Coon Rapids Boulevard. Mr. Harlicker.
Yes, we touched on this briefly with a couple previous applications. Back in December 17th, Planning Commission approved a conditional use permit for a fitness center at 3050 Coon Rapids Boulevard. On April 23rd, the property owner requested that the city revoke the conditional use permit. The original applicant was not leasing the space. I did contact the applicant and advised him of the meeting tonight, and he was fine with the revocation. He was not going to locate there, so he was notified. Given that, in planning case 20-16, the Planning Commission revoked the conditional use permit for the fitness center at the request of the property owner. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Harlicker?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Geisler.
I have a question for staff with respect. It says NA on the 60-day rule. Is that correct that there is not a ticking clock on this like the rest of our cases that we hear?
Right, the 60-day rule, Commissioner Geisler and commissioners, is a state statute, and I learned it just for you guys, and does not apply here. It's basically we have to give word to the applicant. I think he could have an argument he's requesting that it be revoked, but I don't believe it to apply here.
So to that state, if we decided to table this item for the meantime to maintain this conditional use permit for that portion of the property to visit it at a later date, that wouldn't, we're not against a clock to consider it, are we?
My legal opinion is that we are not against the clock. My legal advice is that they have an argument that they are requesting, they have arguably applied for this to be revoked, I would point them to the conditional use permit ordinance that we have. But, yeah. There is not a state statute that applies, in my legal opinion.
Thank you.
Question? Commissioner Bradley.
Mr. Buccioni, so actually in the enforcement mechanism, if they didn't comply with this conditional use permit, our remedy would be to revoke it, right?
Yes, and actually, that's one of the things I wanted to address the commission about, is the relevant ordinance is 11-307.4, and this is actually the remedy for non-compliance with the conditions that you put on a conditional use permit. So, say those earlier agenda items, this body, after a public hearing under that statute, is allowed to revoke a conditional use permit. So, postponing it to say, we want you to comply, but we don't when they don't comply, our sanction is we're going to revoke it.
Mr. Chair, the other comment I would make is that the risk could be if we did not take action, they could sign a lease with another tenant to go into that space. And I don't know which situation would be worse under the conditions, but to me it seems like it's a request, we have to act on it, or should act on it, I guess would be our recommendation. And, you know, that kind of clears the slate so that conditional use would not apply. So, you know, they would have to reapply if they want to come in for another event center.
Mr. Chair.
But they would, in response to that, they would have to find a new tenant that met all the conditions of the current conditional use permit.
Correct.
So in other words, a fitness center meeting those
Or
requirements.
fitness center, yeah, I'm sorry, yes.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Geisler.
And then a question for staff. There could not be an additional conditional use permit issued for this portion of the building then, as a conditional use permit is already in place for it, is that correct?
Well, we don't have one in front of us this evening, so, right, I mean, they would have to apply for a new conditional use permit, but this one would have to be revoked first.
That was my point. We would have to revoke this one before a new one could be issued.
Correct.
Over the same space within that property.
Correct.
Thank you. Is that not true?
No, it absolutely is true.
All right, we do need a public hearing on this matter, so at this time I will open a public hearing in the revocation of a conditional use permit, planning case 20-16 at 3050 Coon Rapids Boulevard. Anyone wish to speak to this public hearing? Anyone wish to speak? Anyone on Zoom?
Nobody.
Nobody. Close the public hearing. Comments to the commission only. Commission. Do we want to take the chance of seeing what the land owner would choose to do, or do we have other thoughts?
I would point out, we do have a meeting still within 60 days from the applicant's request date, which would be relatively consistent with our processes if we wanted to consider something at a later date, seeing that the next meeting, I believe, is June 17th. But
Chair Schwartz.
Commissioner Knobloch.
I agree with Commissioner Geisler with what he said. So, I think we should think really hard about this revocation of conditional permit. That was not a dramatic
Anyone
pause.
else? Anyone choose to make a motion?
I do think we need some more discussion.
All right.
So this would be a chance to send a stronger message? Is that what we're saying? I think that's been accomplished. I don't see the point in not revoking it, just as a matter of process, I guess.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner
Oh,
Bradley.
yeah, thanks.
I tend to agree with Commissioner Casey. At this point, it's getting to be gymnastics, theatrics. I think we should stick with the process. I think a message has been sent pretty loudly, and that we trust staff to do their role with enforcement.
And Commissioner Schmolke.
Chair Schwartz?
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. I'm not just sure that it's really gonna produce a different outcome if we were to hold off with making a decision on this. I feel like we've made motions on the other two. I think we should just go ahead and make our motion and move forward.
And Commissioner Knobloch.
I respectfully and humbly disagree with those viewpoints and very well said viewpoints. I believe you cannot enforce. I've worked in the corporate world long enough that you know when it's time to pursue a principle and push and go as far as you can. In this situation, I think the message needs to go to, with our vote and our recommendations to the city council, and I think this revocation of the conditional use permit should, the vote should be nay.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Geisler.
I would like to clarify, the point of me asking some of these questions tonight is so that the commission fully understands what options we have available for us on a future date. I think we can revoke this tonight and clear it and get it off and be consistent with what we've been doing tonight. However, we are very clearly knocking around all the edges of what's going on this property and what we can and can't do, what staff is going to do and isn't going to do. And so we have a lot of facts in front of us right now. So at that case, with that, I would move planning case 20-16, the revocation of the conditional use permit, revocation of the conditional use permit 20-16.
I'd second.
Motion by Geisler, second by Bradley. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. One opposing vote, Commissioner Knobloch. This is a decision by the Planning Commission and can be appealed to the City Council within 10 days if someone so chooses. All right, finally the case you folks are up and waiting all night for. Sorry it took so long. Planning case 21-17, an apartment building, Goldenrod Street and 102nd Avenue, Copeland Building Corporation. Mr. Harlicker.
Yes, Chair and Commissioners, this is a request for a site plan for a 152-unit, 4-story apartment complex located at east of Highway 10, the entrance ramp, Goldenrod, 102nd. This is a post office, an office building, and this is a progressive, I believe it's the claim center office building here. And this is the kind of the odd-shaped lot. Here is the site plan. It's set up for two buildings connected by a clubhouse. It takes advantage of the unique shape of the property. As you can see, it's kind of two triangular pieces that are connected in the middle by a narrower piece here. and the buildings were aligned to take, I suppose, advantage of that unique shape. One building will have 70 units, and the other one will have 82, for a total of 152. The first floor of the apartment building consists of enclosed parking, and floors 2 through 4 are apartments. Clubhouse functions as an amenity. It's got a fitness center, work area, lounge, community room, and the rental office. Each building has a separate entrance into the parking garage. The enclosed parking areas are not connected. Because they occupy the first floor of the building, there was no way to connect them unless you go through the clubhouse. Then the enclosed parking area, you've got indoor trash enclosures and dog washing stations. Site plan was compared to the required setbacks for building and parking. Buildings comply with the required setbacks. Parking also meets the required setbacks, except for a small section right here. There's about a 6-foot jog in the property line. So the 20-foot setback requirement cannot be met and maintain a smooth traffic flow through the site. That's jog in the property line reduces the setback to about 14 feet. Should the Planning Commission approve the site plan tonight, the applicant will be applying for a variance for that 15-foot setback. Lot area, coverage, and open space. The required lot area is based on the formula that requires a certain amount of area based on the number of units and the number of bedrooms in each unit, as well as the number of enclosed parking. The required lot area is 282,000 square feet, which is about 6.5 acres. The lot is 258,262 square feet, or 66 square feet. About 23,000 square feet short. Translates into about half an acre short. The applicant will also be requesting a variance to the minimum lot size. The site plan does comply with the required open space and lot coverage requirements. The open space includes recreational amenities in this area here. The amenities include a playground, sports court, 2 picnic areas, fire pit, and a dog park. There's also an outdoor patio that's attached to the clubhouse. Bike racks are provided at each building. This is the grading plan for the site. Stormwater management area is right in through here. The rest of the site is fairly level. Parking and access, the applicant is proposing 304 parking spaces with proof of parking for 24 more. The plan includes 150 garage spaces and 154 spaces. That equates to 2 spaces per unit. They also have a proof of parking area here and here for additional parking if needed. With the proof of parking, the ratio increases to 2.16 spaces per unit. Code requires 2.25. However, there is a section in the zoning code in the parking requirements section that allows, providing the occupant has documentation supporting the reduction, that the Planning Commission can reduce the required amount of parking on a case-by-case basis. The applicant has provided documentation that shows that the proposed parking ratio at 2.1 units per acre. In their documentation, they indicated that 80% of the apartments, they do require a parking ratio of 2 spaces per unit. He referenced 5 cities, including Ramsey, Mounds View, and Maple Grove, that use the 2 spaces per unit ratio without problem. Staff is comfortable granting relief to the proposed 328 spaces. Access, there's 2 points of access, one off of Goldenrod here, and then another one off of 102nd here. The parking lots are interconnected, looping around the front and then down along the east side adjacent to the office building. A sidewalk is proposed along Goldenrod from the north end of the site around the bend in the road over to the west end of the site. Landscaping, the landscaping code standards requires 16 street trees. The applicant is showing 13, so they'll have to add 3 trees along the boulevard. In the open yard, the landscaping does comply with the open space landscaping requirement with a mix of overstory trees, evergreens, ornamental trees, and excuse me, shrubs. There are existing 24 trees that will be preserved on site. Parking lot landscaping, code requires 3% of the parking lot be landscaped. The plan includes 4.5%. The building design, the 4-story buildings, 70 and 82 units. The main entrance into each of the building is via the clubhouse, which connects the 2 buildings. The buildings will be 48 feet high. Code allows a maximum of up to 70 feet. The building elevations include breaks and bump outs that break up the facades. There are balconies and overhangs that also provide relief to the building. And then there are dormers over the balconies and raised parapets that provide relief in the roof line. The exterior is a mix of materials and colors, include a brick veneer of the base. The materials on the wall are different shades of gray horizontal lap siding, textured to provide a wood appearance. Accent materials include vertical siding and horizontal wood grain siding. Materials are used, similar materials are used on all 4 sides of the building. This is the building on the west end of the site. The elevation you're looking at is this elevation here. The materials are the same for all 4 sides. And this is what the end of the building would look like. This second building is this elevation, this building here. Again, it's got the same type of materials wrapped around all 4 sides. Park dedication. Park dedication for apartments is $1,360 per unit, not, it was a typo in the staff reports. It's $1,360, not $1,300. Payment of the fees will be due prior to the issuance of building permits. Signage, there are 2 signs proposed, one at this end here and one over by this entrance. The sign code does allow for 1 signage per street frontage. The signs do meet the required 10-foot setback for monument signs, and the signs will require separate sign permits. With that, staff Staff is recommending the commission approve the proposed site plan with the following conditions. Project comply with Title 11. All engineering comments be addressed. Park dedication, in the amount of $1,360 per unit, be paid prior to the issuance of building permits. All landscaped areas be irrigated. All signs require separate permits. Additional 3 overstory trees required along the street frontage. The applicant has granted the variances to the required parking setback and minimum lot size. And if city staff determines that parking has become an issue, the applicant will install the proof of parking as shown on the site plan. With that, I'll answer any questions. And I believe the applicants are available via Zoom.
All right, thank you, Mr. Harlicker. Commission, any questions for Mr. Harlicker?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Geisler.
Mr. Harlicker, how many units would have to be removed in order to make the lot area, lot coverage be in compliance?
I believe it was 12 studio.
So 12 bedrooms or 2 studio equivalent?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Chair Schwartz.
Commissioner Knobloch.
The current location in question is a wooded lot at the moment?
Pardon?
The area it's wooded along Highway 10 between the 2 office buildings, the Progressive Insurance or whatever it is.
Correct.
And the office, okay. A second question I have is fire truck access with the 2 entrance points to this 2-phase development?
Yeah, the fire department has reviewed the application and they're
fine with it.
satisfied with some comments I believe they're included in the engineering memo.
Okay. A third question I have is there a south view that you would see from Highway 10 in the packet? I'm not sure which one it is, but...
Yeah, it would be this one here, and they were included in the staff report for the purposes of this presentation. They're similar on all 4 sides of makeup and material.
Okay. And then my last question is just the landscaping looks wonderful on the Goldenrod and on the 102nd roads, but it seems with meeting the requirements, the landscaping is wonderful on the road side, but I'm a little concerned about the landscaping facing 10. Because and I'll give some backstory why this is a concern to me, because of previous developments that we had between Crooked, Lake Boulevard, and Main Street. And I live near there, and I drive by there every day. And the southern end of Crooked Lake, where a big portion of trees were removed, and then also all the homes that were put in along Highway 10, the only trees that are now in there are evergreen trees that haven't grown since the day they've been put in. And I get to look at that, and I bet you a lot of other people see that as they're going through this section of Coon Rapids. So my concern is there potential for increased landscaping on the Highway 10 side of this proposal?
Commissioner Knobloch, you're talking about this area in here? There is quite a bit down here. All these little, those are all trees that are being preserved.
Okay. And then there's like a fire pit, proposed fire pit, and then
there's
a
1,
kid's
2, 3,
playground.
4 trees
And that's all
existing, plus
facing
2 new
Highway 10.
ones.
Okay.
Yep. This area here
Patio.
is the stormwater management area. So you're limited as to what you can do for landscaping there. And this ties in with the open space requirements, an area that's open for informal recreation, playing catch, throwing frisbees, that sort of thing.
Okay, good.
So if you start putting trees in there, it interferes with that type of use.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that was emphasized as part of that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Chair Schwartz?
Commissioner Bradley?
Mr. Harlicker, has the applicant demonstrated to the city that it's not feasible to comply with the acreage and the need for a design that require these variances? Aren't they able to have a design that wouldn't require that?
We have talked with them about redesigning it. Given the shape of the site, there's really, other thing that comes into play is the high groundwater level. That's where they couldn't do underground parking. You get a reduction in the amount of required lot size with underground parking. Typically what you'd have is the area under the clubhouse would include parking. And that would bring the required lot size down to less than what the actual site is.
Yeah, but my point
so
would
that's
be,
the reason why they can't meet the
well, no,
minimum
but
lot size requirement.
they could, I suppose, if they reduced some of the units.
Yes.
They'd be able to place the buildings where it didn't met the setback requirements. It would also then satisfy the parking requirements, right?
Yeah, they're really tight, and there's a 50-foot setback requirement along here, so you can't, push the buildings any closer to here. They're pushed this way, it's as far as they can, and meet the setback requirements from the streets and the side property lines. So this is really the only place where the structures can go.
The structures as designed, I guess. What I'm saying is if they altered the size or cut units, they should be able to fit structures in there that comply with the code.
Yeah, if they reduce the number of units, they could.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Geisler?
Mr. Harlicker, there's a black chain link fence that runs along there. Is that in MnDOT's land or is that on this property?
I'm not sure. I assume it's probably along the highway.
Yeah, it's
Typically, they're in MnDOT property and not on private lots when they do that, but we can check the Alta survey.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Harlicker?
I have one quick question. Is now phase one, phase two, phase one gets completed completely along with the clubhouse before phase two comes in?
Commissioner, they could do it in phases. They do this. We wouldn't let them just, do this and, for instance, put the foundation for that in. We've had bad experiences with that in the past. But yeah, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they'll do half of it and then do the other half, similar to what the Riverdale project did. What Sherman did. I believe those went in at the same time, didn't they?
Mr. Chair, yeah, the Sherman project, yes, the sequencing was very similar. I will say that I did have a conversation with the petitioner about that question because initially they had talked about putting the foundations in for the second phase building, and we had concerns about that, and so they have represented to us that they will build everything at one time.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Casey?
So, Mr. Harlicker, this is a secure entry building, I'm assuming, and the entry then would have to be through the clubhouse?
Correct.
And is that where the secure entry will be? Do you know? Or will it be to each side of the wing? Or it'll be right at the main clubhouse door?
Yeah, the visitors and renters would come in through the clubhouse and then go to the different wings to get to their apartments.
But the security would be right at the main clubhouse door?
Correct.
Oh.
Chair and Commissioners. My name is Rick Engstrom. I'm a project manager with Copeland Building Corporation. And we will, as far as the secured access, we will have secure access on both the ends of the building or between the ends of the buildings. Also, wouldn't be for visitors. It would be, the visitors would have to go to the clubhouse. And that would be the main entry there. So, and then.
What is the name of the site, or what will be the name of the apartment complex?
I'm not sure what the name of the site, if that's been given or discussed yet. The owner, Michael King, I don't think he's come up with a name on that yet. Yes.
So did you say that the residents of the buildings will have access at another point besides?
Yes, there's two accesses, two stairways that will have exterior access on each one of the two end wings. And those will have fob type security entrances.
And elevators? I'm assuming there's elevators
Yes,
somewhere. Which I don't see.
Elevators located at this point that are towards the clubhouse end. Down in that area.
Is it just one elevator per wing?
Yes, at this point. There is discussion about adding 2 other elevators.
Mr. Chair Schwartz, just so you're aware, the architect is present on Zoom and would like to address the commission at the appropriate time.
And maybe the architect could probably weigh in on that better than I can at this point too.
Sure, let's bring him in right now.
Good evening, Mark with Coal Group Architects. I can answer any questions you guys have with the building plan design. There are 1 elevator per building, and they're located by the clubhouse. There's 2 stairways on each wing. Those will be secure entries along with the clubhouse entry. So there's technically per building 2 secured entries for residents, and visitors would go to the main clubhouse and then access either phase 1 or phase 2 via the clubhouse through a secured entry as well.
And is there anything else you'd like to add to the presentation?
I know there's a concern with reducing units would help the building comply. The big hurdle we hit was we weren't able to go underground with any parking, and if we were allowed to do that, we would have complied by over 40,000 square feet with 152 units. So we had to pull everything out, put it at grade, and that put us literally 12 beds over the lot coverage requirement, but yet we meet impervious building coverage, open space. Open space are actually over by, I think, 12,000 square feet. So the site's big enough. It's just one caveat of the lot coverage is the lot area we were short on.
All right. At this time, we will need to have a public hearing. And I will open a public hearing in planning case 21-17, an apartment building at Goldenrod Street and 102nd Avenue, Copeland Building Corporation. And we received 1 email from a person who could not make it tonight that wished to have her comments put onto the record. so I'll read that now. Mr. Harlicker, I live on Foley Boulevard, directly across from the post office. I'm very interested in the outcome of this meeting. I am very concerned about the impact of this project on our neighborhood. However, I have to work tomorrow night and will be unable to attend in person. I have a number of questions that if I was there, I would like to ask. I have listed them below and would appreciate two things: a response back to each question, and the question answers be entered into the meeting record. And her questions are, number one, why is the city of Coon Rapids considering this project? Number two, has an environmental impact study been completed addressing the impact on noise, wildlife, oxygen levels when trees are cut down? Number three, has a traffic impact study been completed addressing increases, traffic flow, additional traffic lights? Number four, has a property value impact study been completed on the impact of the properties on both the north and south side of Foley Boulevard? Number five, who will the management company be once the complex is completed? Number six, what's the maximum capacity of people that could live in the complex? Number seven, what is the projected start and end date of the project? Number eight, when will it be available for occupancy? Number nine, what kind of designation will it have? Single family, multifamily, no designation? Other questions she has here are, what will the price points be for rent? Who will be the management company? Will there be an on-site manager? What impact will it have on traffic during the building? And will trees be left as camouflage facing Foley or Goldenrod? And the final question is, what is the total acreage that will be developed? And that was presented by Mary Frank. Anyone else wish to speak at the public hearing? Please come to the microphone, give your name and address for the record. Limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Brian Lindstrom. I live at 10221 Foley Boulevard, right next door to Mary. She addressed all of our concerns, primarily just the wildlife that's back there, the trees that are back there. That's going to be offset when they do that. That's going to be impacted. The traffic levels are going to be impacted. They've already been impacted through projects that have happened just recently. And then we're concerned about what type of apartments are they? Is it being opened up to all levels of income and therefore all levels of criminal activity that can flood into our neighborhood? And that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
My name is Jordan Hart Anderson. I live at 10201 Foley Boulevard. I am also neighbors of Mary. I understand that a traffic impact study was done. Can you guys tell me when it was looked at or when the information was pulled from specifically? Because I know when the zoning changed for this property was during COVID, when everybody was told to stay home by our governor, which was also the reason why nobody was present during the zoning change meeting. Does anybody have a clue when that impact study was done?
In the packet of what I was reading, to my understanding, it looks like 2018 was the time the data was reviewed for the traffic study.
Why was the traffic study done before the zoning was changed?
I know, but the data is from 2018. The report's from April 22nd, 21, but the data is from, it's referencing 2018.
Also,
and they said there's been no change over the last, there's been no incremental change over the last 2-3 years.
Okay. Also, I know it was mentioned that there is a park on the other side of the post office from that. Any evening that they have baseball games or softball games or t-ball games, whatever children's sports are going on over there, There's already overflow parking onto Goldenrod, and I'm curious if that was taken into account during the impact study, because that will stop the flow of any emergency vehicle that needs to get through there and potentially impact these people getting to their apartment building, because they, a lot of times, are parked on both sides of the road back there. And last but not least, in regards to the parking situation, if they were to have visitors at the apartment buildings, where are their visitors anticipated to park if you're already at your barely maximum parking space to tenant ratio? Furthermore, most of this traffic is going to travel down the neighborhood behind us to get to the gas station, which is centrally located on 101st and Foley Boulevard. My concern would be all of the people that walk on the street behind us on Dogwood. I know that a lot of them were not presented with the information that we were on Foley about this project, and I know that most of them are concerned. There are a lot of families living on that street with children and dogs that walk on that street very regularly. Was that taken into account with the traffic impact study? Those are my major concerns with the project at this time. We have a sidewalk on Foley, which accommodates us walking, but everybody else is kind of screwed, for lack of a better term.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Public hearing. Mr. Buccioni? Someone on Zoom?
One on Zoom, I'm allowing John Clockman to talk right now. Mr. Clockman, please unmute yourself and speak.
Yes, thank you. I represent the PCTHS Building Company, which is currently has a purchase agreement for the former Progressive site, which is just north of this site. And we are in the process with the city of applying for a rezoning for that property to build a charter school on that site. Of course, that will require a conditional use permit if the rezoning is approved, et cetera. We would like to speak in favor of this apartment building project. We believe it's a very compatible use with the use we have planned for the Progressive site. And it is, we believe that both the apartment, because of the shortage of apartment units in the metro area at large, and the shortage of alternative school programs for high schoolers, which our program is, and because of the proximity of Aspen Park, we believe it's a very good location for rental housing and a charter school. So we'd like to speak in favor. Thank you. I'm representing Paladin Career and Technical High School, which is currently at the Northtown Mall in Blaine, nearby. We are looking to expand our facility onto this site. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Anyone else on Zoom?
No, well, the applicant still, but he's pictured right now and doesn't look like he wants to talk.
Well, I was just going to respond to a couple of concerns, but I don't know if this is the right time or...
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. I know there's the traffic study concern. The traffic study, we're adding 152 theoretically more cars possibly driving at one time. I think the concern would be more if this was a Walmart or something going in, we're going to have, 50 cars coming in every minute. Maybe at 8 in the morning, there could be some traffic, and at 5 p.m. at night. But as the study showed, this really was going to have no impact on the surrounding areas. And most of these cars are going to be coming off the street. I believe it was, I can't remember the main road that's going by the post office.
Foley Boulevard?
Foley Boulevard, yeah. It's going to be more on Golden Street and 102nd Avenue. As for the 2-to-1 parking, that does take into consideration visitor parking, and it's worked very well in the surrounding communities. So there isn't a concern on our end about that. And if people do have more cars in Coon Rapids and then invite all their friends over, that's why we're showing the proof of parking, so we can easily add quite a few more stalls if we start to see that our assumptions are incorrect. And then maybe Copeland can chime in on this, but as for the proposed renters, these units are very large. These are not combined cheap units. So it is my assumption that they're going to be marketing to a more higher income population due to the size of these units. So, and that's all.
All right, thank you. Anyone else wish to speak at the public hearing before I close it? Last call. Close the public hearing. Mr. Hardiker, as far as the responses to the questions from Mrs. Frank, you can have somebody reply to all these, or?
Is it sufficient that it's included in the record, or we need to verbally respond to each?
It's no different than if she were standing there right now. You can choose to respond or not.
Pardon?
It's like if she was in
Yep.
person here, some of the questions have been addressed.
Chair, we did receive a response from the applicant, and he did answer the questions. We can read those into the record, unless the applicant wants to speak to it. The first question is, why is Coon Rapids considering this project? The proposal is a permitted use, and land is privately owned and zoned for multifamily. And so that's why the Coon Rapids is considering it. Had an environmental impact study been completed? The response was every designated authority has been notified of the project, and all environmental impacts have been considered. The owner has approval from the Coon Creek Watershed District and will comply with all city engineers' requirements for the project. The owner is hiring WSB Engineering as a third-party consultant to overlook stormwater impact during construction. The owner has a permit from the DNR for dewatering if necessary. They also have a permit from MnDOT. There are no wetlands currently on the site, and the buildings will block some noise from Highway 10. Wildlife, due to the large pond being added, more wildlife will probably be seen in the area, ducks and geese. There is still a vast forested area to the northwest which will not be touched for current wildlife. Oxygen levels, there will be zero noticeable change in oxygen levels. There will be trees added per city landscape requirements, and the area will be more groomed, giving it more curb appeal. Has a traffic impact study been completed? I believe applicant just addressed that issue. Yes, it has been done. The property value impact study has a property value impact study been completed? No property value study has been done. The project will be a Class A market rate apartment complex with all kinds of amenities. The project will be a great addition to the community. Who will a management company be once the project is completed? The management company is INH Properties. Excuse me. They manage multiple properties in the immediate region and have also successfully managed in the city of Coon Rapids in the past. They have high quality standards, particularly with respect to qualifying new residents and with the presentation and curb appeal of the property. They are a 40-year-old fully accredited management organization. What is the maximum capacity of the people who could live in the apartment complex? There are 152 apartment units. There are studio units, one-bedroom units, two-bedroom units, and a handful of three-bedroom units. What is the projected start and end date for the project? 9/1/21 start of construction. Completion is scheduled for spring 2023. When will it be available for occupancy? 9122, I think the number 7 might have been, should be 2022. What kind of designation will it have? It'll be multifamily. What will the price points be for rent? To be determined. Will the management company, answered above. Will there be an on-site manager? Yes, there will be on-site staff that includes an on-site property manager. What impact will it have on traffic during the build? General contractor believes construction will have very little impact on traffic. Will trees be left as camouflage facing Foley and Goldenrod? Owner has provided a landscape plan that complies with the city landscape requirements. And yes, there will be trees that will be planted along the property that will, property line that will camouflage the project from Foley and Goldenrod to some extent. What is the total acreage of the site? The property is just under 6 acres.
Thank you. And Commission, your thoughts?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Geisler.
I have a question for the applicant, specifically the architect, I believe. Just question about, has there been any review for the plan as far as renewables, i.e. solar, on the rooftops, and/or are you planning any, especially in your underground parking space, any ability for EV chargers or wiring for it if you're not putting in chargers specifically off the bat? Has there been any consideration for those items?
We have the opportunity to put in those chargers, but at this time, that conversation has not come up. That will come up later on when we start designing the building further for construction purposes.
And what about solar on the roof?
With the pitched roof, we haven't typically done solar panels in this type of design.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr.
Mr.
Casey.
Chair. Yeah, so can you detail, and maybe Mr. Herlicker did, but I missed it, how many 3 bedrooms, how many 2 bedrooms, that kind of thing? Do you have that? Or I didn't catch it if I didn't get it written down. Oh, okay. It's all the small print. Okay, I think it is here.
I can respond to that if you need.
Why don't you go ahead and put it on the record?
So per phase, we have 3 1-bedrooms, or I'm sorry, 3 3-bedrooms. And then the studios for phase 1, we have 10. 1-bedrooms, 23. 1-bedroom dens, 7. And then 2-bedrooms, 27. And that mix is pretty consistent with the phase 2, with a few more studios.
Thank you.
Anyone else have questions,
Mr. Chair?
comments? Commissioner Heikler.
Will the entire project be completed before anybody is allowed to move in? So if somebody wanted an apartment on 4th floor, way, on the western end, would they have that option, or do they have to move into an apartment? Is it all going to be complete, I guess, is the answer, or the question?
I can probably answer that. Yes, we're planning on,
Microphone, please, for the secretary.
Yeah, we're planning on constructing consecutively. In other words, moving from one to the next onto construction, for the construction purposes.
Mr. Chair, just to clarify, I guess from a building code standpoint, we won't issue a certificate of occupancy for the building. So everything is going to have to pass, for one of the buildings in order for tenants to move in. So you'll have to have exiting, and all of those code requirements will have to be met. So a tenant isn't going to move into a finished unit when there's unfinished units on a lower floor.
My question is phase 1 and phase 2, both are going to be 100% complete before somebody moves into either of them?
I guess the applicant should answer that question.
it's my understanding that that's what we're planning on doing is, I believe we're planning on working on both of them at the same time. Now, I don't know, phase one might get done sooner than phase two, but I guess at this point in time, we're planning on working on both of them at the same time.
And any other questions, comments? Do we have samples of the building materials?
You know, does this sidewalk just all of a sudden end here? Or is there another, does it connect to another?
I don't know.
Like up to Foley?
Of course, this is the architectural shingles.
This is Goldenrod.
Using timberline.
Park is over here.
Right, and then going out here, right?
But
Because
the
And
other-
this would be in here.
we've got samples of
So
the,
this would be fully.
I don't know if you have,
Right. But does this parking lot?
this is the
stop here?
horizontal side.
Does it connect to an existing?
I can't tell you off the top of my head. I don't remember.
This is the pre-finished
And the same thing here.
hardboard.
Stop.
And then we've got some vertical metal siding, a darker metal and a lighter. This one's charcoal gray, and this one is driftwood gray. I don't know if you want to see those.
Commission want to see them up close, or is that sufficient?
I'm fine.
That's fine, thank you.
It's helpful.
The wood grain siding is maintenance-free, correct? That's like the mason board?
Yes,
Okay.
these are all maintenance-free.
Okay.
And Commission, any other comments, questions?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Geisler?
You know, we rezoned this, we planned for this is coming. I'm a little concerned about how big it is. It is a little, you know, we're underparked, we're short on the acreage. I understand that the site has challenges with water. You know, I do think that it's a good design. I do think that it's a nice looking building. It will front a highway fairly well. You know, I do worry about parking more specifically in market rate apartments, mainly just for having more vehicles potentially being at that site. But, you know, I mean, the applicant has done their due diligence to say whether or not, you know, other places are doing it at 2, we're at 2 1/4, they're meeting us in the middle at 2.16. I'm not as concerned about the parking here as we've had in other conversations over the last couple of years. You know, I think the amenity plan here is pretty solid. I mean, it's pretty much hitting every single conversation I think we've had. Bike racks, dog park, fire pit, camping area, picnic area. It's a fairly well amenitied site, especially when you've got the ballparks right next door. You know, it's a little unfortunate transit is over a half-mile away on University. You know, we're starting to get quite a bit on Foley. Maybe it makes sense to get some, you know, having the conversation, the city can talk with Metro Transit about that at some point. Not our purview, but it certainly makes it much easier to have denser living when there's transit available. But all in all, I think while there are a lot of variances, including even just the goofy little lot corner, I mean, while that's there, that's where the driveway is. I wouldn't see that being a material change, in my opinion, one way or the other. They'd have to move the entire parking lot, and it just doesn't fit. So I think what's being asked for is reasonable here. It felt like a lot when I first looked at it, but as I got deeper into it, it started to make a little more sense. And frankly, the applicant did the work to prove why right off the bat. So I'm looking forward to seeing this apartment building get built.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Bradley?
I agree with you to some extent. I mean, it makes sense for this property, But there are variances from the code as far as lot density. There's the parking issue, and then there are some of the setback variances. It's incumbent on the applicant to demonstrate that it's not feasible to develop the property within the code and that these variances are necessary for the development. They've explained it, but they haven't shown that it's necessary, that they can't develop it and it's not feasible to develop it in compliance with the codes. And based on that alone, I would oppose this. They have to demonstrate that there is an absolute need for these variances, and they haven't really explained other than they weren't able to do underground parking. Well, okay, but you still have, 4.5 acres that you're trying to develop. I understand from a profitability standpoint, it makes more sense to them. The more units they can put in there, the better it is. But there's got to be a balance here. And we want to encourage the development, but we also need them to demonstrate why they'll have to do it, and it's not feasible to do it within the code as it stands. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Casey.
So along the back side of the building, and it's the back sides with the patio out there and the other amenities, the only thing separating it visually from Highway 10 is some existing trees, a 4-foot fence, I guess, that might belong to MnDOT. Is that what's going to separate it from? I would think there could be some staggered privacy fences along the way, or just something to break that up. But then I guess I'm seeing trees that are still going to be in the area, and that there's a lot of foliage, but I guess I would hope to see some kind of a staggered eye catcher, just something to break up that whole backside.
Chair Schwartz, the applicant over Zoom is requesting the opportunity to address the density of the development.
All right, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Just to address the concern of the need for the extra units, based on the conversations I've had with the owner in Copeland, being that we are literally 100 yards from heavy traffic, heavy noise, semis going by, they do have concerns of marketing, possibly, and if the less, say 12 units less, that's money they're losing. And so I think they feel more comfortable having more of a buffer to build, with the ability to pad a few more units, as they don't expect this thing to fill up overnight. And so I think that was another reason to kind of have the 152 when they did their market study. That number fit to make this site feasible to basically have your back door be Highway 10. So I just want to kind of point that out if that hasn't been thought of already. You have this nice lot here, it's kind of an odd shape, and Highway 10 is your back door. These guys found a number of units that they felt comfortable with, and we've really tried hard to make it work. And literally the only thing we fell short on was, lot size, and without that groundwater, we would have easily overcame that. So I just want to throw that out there in case that wasn't thought of yet. But there is a kind of a financial number with the 152 that everything made to make sense with the owner based on the conversations I've had. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, Commission. Thoughts or motions?
Chair Schwartz, I'll make a motion.
Commissioner Knobloch.
I'll make a motion in planning case 21-17. The Planning Commission approve the proposed site plan with the following conditions. Number 1, the project comply with City Code Title 11. Number 2, all engineering comments be addressed. Number 3, park dedication in the amount of $1,300 per apartment unit be paid prior to the issuance of building permits. 4, all landscape areas be irrigated. 5, all signs require separate permits. 6, an additional 3 overstory trees are required along the street. Number 7, the applicant is granted variances to the required parking setback along 102nd Avenue and minimum lot size. Number 8, if city staff determines that parking has become an issue, the applicant will install the proof of parking as shown on the site plan.
Just one correction in your motion, the park dedication is 1,360 for the apartment.
Okay.
Second the corrected motion.
And can we also add an additional 3 overstory trees are required along the street? Which street is that referring to, Goldenrod or 102nd? Just
It could be either.
Chair, I think it could be
either?
Either one?
Okay.
Either one, yeah.
That's my Canadian there. Yeah, either.
So that's already there then.
Okay, that's sufficient.
Mr. Chair?
We have a motion and a second. Motion by Knobloch, second by Geisler. Any further discussion? Commissioner Schmolke.
Thank you, sorry. So I'm just not sure that Commissioner Bradley's question was answered then. I mean, we heard clearly that, there's a financial reason for why they presented the proposal they have, but they haven't answered the question in terms of if there is another option, so that we have something to balance, right? If they, to just know if this is the right thing to vote for. So I'm apprehensive about approving it tonight, only because I just don't feel like that question has been answered.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Geisler.
So with respect to the 3 variances, the specific variance on 102nd, looking at what this site is, if this site was actually square, like it was, without this little tiny jog that's cut out of it, that wouldn't be an issue today. That's a piece that's just there for the city and to allow, 102nd to widen out for the turn lane. That variance to me is so immaterial compared to the entire discussion that we're having here. And I understand that the applicant has to do something, it has to prove that. However, in order to do that, we're totally changing the entire design of the site to encompass a small 6-foot jog.
That's the least, I'm sorry, may I respond?
Go ahead, Commissioner Bradley.
Yeah, that's the least of my concerns, is that particular variance, but there's also the density. They're a half acre short of what they should have for the number of units that they have. They're under the parking requirement, and plus there's an additional setback if I might be in error on that, but I believe there's an additional setback. All of these things could be addressed by a redesign, and it may require fewer units, but they haven't demonstrated that it's not feasible to bring back a different design that complies.
Chair Schwartz.
Commissioner Knobloch.
I agree with Commissioner Geisler, and I partially agree with Commissioner Bradley, but the reason being there is a feasibility and a profitability, and I think the explanations provided today are more than sufficient. For this is a very nice project. It's very well designed, and like Commissioner Geisler said, it's an extremely complex site plan to work with, and the amount that they've been able to integrate with all our requirements in our area, in our city, into this unique site plan, I think is a good achievement. And I think they've been quite accommodating, and with the water table that they were considering, if there wasn't that issue, they would have put in, it sounds like they would have put in underground parking, but that wasn't feasible in this situation. So if you take in all these variables, I think it's quite minor to a lot of other issues that we've had before this commission, that this pales, in my view, in my opinion, pales in comparison to some of the other things we've had to deal with. So that's just my slant on it. I think it's a very good project. I think enough sufficient information and explanations have been provided that we should approve this proposal.
Mr. Chair, if I may finish my comments from before.
Commissioner Geisler.
I do also want to point out, we are not having a conversation about other things that need to be added to this site because they already did it. We've had conversations and many times talking about, okay, you're short parking and you don't have this, and you don't have that, and you don't have. They've got it all here, which is why I don't think we have a whole lot of, well, we're going to give you something, well, we're going to get something. Well, they delivered it on the plan like we would have normally asked for. And that's where I'm seeing this as being done better. You know, it's not a requirement to have a picnic area and all these other amenities built out. Those are things that we typically ask for when we give a little bit on some of these. They're already here and they're already planning for it. That's why I'm more comfortable with this. I do agree that usually when we give something, we should be making sure that the site is giving us something back as a city. And I think this site is doing that. So, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Casey.
So I think it's a very problematic lot. You know, I had no idea about the groundwater, that came up because we've had very little interest in that lot because it's hard to develop. It's odd shaped. I think the project is very attractive, and you'd hardly think it, but I think apartments are in real short supply, just like housing is right now. And Coon Rapids is experiencing that. I think it's an amenity for the city to have a project like that, and at a pretty central location, not too far off Highway 10. So I intend to vote for it tonight.
Mr. Chair. Commissioner Bradley. Yeah, not to belabor the point, but I guess I believe to grant a variance, you specifically have to have demonstrated and make a finding that it's not practical or feasible to go forward without the variance. And legal can correct me if I'm wrong. But that's part of the basis for these rules. That's part of the basis for finding an exception to the rules. We are lacking that.
Mm-hmm.
And we're abdicating our responsibility by just bypassing it. And I feel rather strongly about that.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Schmolke.
Is this one of those things that we have an option to postpone, to ask them to come back with at least some sort of an an answer to the question? I have to agree with Commissioner Bradley that it's like they haven't done the due diligence on there. We heard an answer, but it's not the answer to the question.
Chair Schwartz.
Mr. Coney.
As the agenda item as it currently sits accurately reflects the 60-day rule. We could notify the applicant of us extending it for 60 additional days because it currently runs on June 11th before the next planning commission.
Okay. So that would give them time to at least present the answer.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then Mr. Buccioni, response to the variance questions. Do we have to have explanations for all three of them?
There needs to be facts in the record that support the findings. And this body could look at the things presented and determine that's enough or say it's not enough.
Mr. Chair, just to clarify, if I may, but the variance decision is actually made by the Board of Adjustment and Appeals, correct? So they will have to, I mean, obviously based on the decision the Planning Commission makes tonight, whatever that is, they'd also have to go through the formal process of applying for a variance. And then the Board of Adjustment and Appeals would weigh, I think, the factors that you're talking about. So to some extent, I guess this kind of gets double scrutiny, if you will. In some ways, the Planning Commission can weigh in on it, but you're not actually, I don't believe you're actually rendering an opinion on the variance itself. Because this isn't a variance application, right? It's subject to, you have to apply for a variance and it would have to be granted. I believe that's the case.
Which is stated in condition 7
Right.
of this approval.
Right.
Right.
Mr. Chair, if I respond?
Commissioner Bradley.
And that's true. The variance issue wouldn't be in front of us tonight. However, we'd be approving a plan that we know is in non-compliance. And if the variance wasn't granted, then we'd be going back again on a new plan, possibly in the future. I think it is more effective and more efficient for us to try to deal with this in one fell swoop if we could. If they can make a presentation that convinces us that it's necessary for them and it's not feasible to develop it without the variances, we can approve it and they can go and apply for it. But at this point, I'm looking at it like it's going to be an issue. And part of that maybe was because I previously sat on the Board of Adjustments and Appeals where we had to decide the variances. At this point, nothing that he's presented to me would even come close to what I think is necessary to satisfy it.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Geisler.
I do think it's important to remember that the Board of Adjustments and Appeals, though, is the one to weigh in on that, and that the applicant would be, that's where the applicant would bring those facts to. They weren't requested to bring those facts here to prove their variances to this meeting. That's not what we're here to do today. And so, while I appreciate the insight, and I don't disagree with your judgment from sitting on that, it's not our place to decide whether or not the variances should be granted or not today. It's whether or not this site plan is something that we as a body want to see moving forward, and then the variances can be solved, as well as the city council. If we decided to deny this, the city council would be then looking at this if they wanted to appeal it, which could create more headache. And if we ask them to go back and try to redesign it, then we're back at the same situation of adding more work to this. So I think, we're either going to be talking about a variance or we're asking the applicant to go back and do rework their homework. And in my opinion, they've got a plan here. It's ready to go. We let the Adjustments and Appeals do their part and move from there.
Chair Schwartz.
And, excuse me, go ahead, Commissioner Knobloch.
I completely agree with Commissioner Geisler, and sorry for that, I couldn't help it. So I hope your throat feels better.
Need water.
Yeah, I think in regards to the variances, it is a requirement. It's our recommendation. It's item 7. They have to fulfill the requirements for the variances, and that will work its way out as it should. And our recommendation is to the city council, and they can also take it in their capacity forward. But we're here to provide advisory counsel and input. And I like I don't completely agree, Commissioner Bradley, with your viewpoint, but I respect it, and that's fine. I understand that, since I have kind of divergent views at times too. So.
And we've handled many cases in the past with requirements for variances that we've done this very same way. We passed with the understanding that they had to meet the condition of the variance and left it to the Board of Adjustments and Appeals.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Schmolke.
I just want to make one correction to Commissioner Knobloch's comment. We are not making a recommendation tonight. We are approving. Thank you.
I'll approve it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And was it Commissioner Heikkila?
No, I like this concept. I like the building. I'm a little concerned about squeezing that many units in, frankly, and it's going to be a burden and tough on the neighborhood. But situation as it is with groundwater and so forth, I feel like it's a good project, and I would vote to approve it.
Any further discussion?
I'm sorry, one more comment, just in response.
Mrs. Shulkey.
Thank you. So, I think the other thing you have to remember when we talk about the density of this, this came up when we were first reviewing this property to change the zone, right? And the density, right? To say that we are going to change it from I think it was industrial to the density that it is now. That's allowing that. We had the conversation of what does that mean? What could move in there? This is what we agreed to. We agreed, this is the risk, I should say,
Yeah.
in terms of having apartment buildings. We have the apartment building that's a kitty corner across Highway 10 that was another very tight fit, a lot of units, and we approved that one. I'm not saying that we're like locked into having to approve these every time they're brought forward. We should challenge it based on the location and so forth, but we set this up. I mean, the conversation was there in terms of the type of business that would be going in here. This wasn't going to be a truck stop or something like that. It's different. I just had to share.
Any further discussion?
One more thing.
Commissioner Casey.
In addition, when the gentleman, the architect, talked about the density and the fact that taking 12 units off of the inventory or the building, that's, when you're looking at 3 floors with 4, I mean, that's like 6 units off of a building, or 3 off of each wing. It just doesn't seem impactful to me when you drill down to those numbers. I know it amounts to a ½ acre, but I feel like that whole parking groundwater situation threw a monkey wrench into it. So it's not going to deter me. I am going to vote for the project.
Anything else? All right, we do have the motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
All right, the motion carries with Commissioner Bradley opposed. This is a decision by the Planning Commission and can be appealed to the City Council within 10 business days if so choose. Good luck. And other business. Mr. Harlicker.
You've been standing a
The
long
Wild are
time.
currently winning 2-0.
Oh, good, that's great.
How about the Twins? But they,
Next month, we've got another full agenda. The second phase of Sherman's project by Riverdale. We'll be considering that preliminary plat and site plan. We'll be considering an assisted living facility for the property at 1575 Coon Rapids Boulevard. Should if it gets approved by council, you'll be seeing it at the June meeting. What else? You heard from the gentleman at the Progressive site. They'll be in for rezoning and zone change from general commercial to moderate density residential to convert that site to a charter school. And a couple ordinance amendments. One is to bring the residential zoning density so they're consistent with the comp plan. We had that discussion earlier. And the other one is we've got a request for a medical marijuana dispensary, which isn't addressed in the city code. So there'll be an ordinance amendment for a definition, and they're proposing to have it as a permitted use in the community commercial
district.
That is a full plate.
Yeah, it'll be a big agenda.
Add to other business.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Geisler.
Mr. Harlicker, we've had a lot of discussions about parking for apartment buildings, whether 2.0 versus 2.25, what's the magic number? Has there been any discussion with staff to potentially revise that ordinance as well?
At this point, no.
Thank you.
We did go through and, as part of the rezoning 2011, I think we did it. It was a while ago. We did adjust the parking requirements for a number of uses. I don't recall if apartments specifically were changed, but I can check into that.
Thank you.
Chair Schwartz.
Commissioner Knobloch.
Commissioner Geisler got me thinking on a question for Mr. Harlicker. I know on some of the previous apartment spacing issues and questions we've had with other projects, and we've had market studies of different areas of the Twin Cities and what every different area had. Is that something that we could use as a template or a base to look at as a comparative purposes of what we could have for density? You know, like different areas had 1.6, some had 2.5, you know, what's the magic number?
Yep, there's resources out there.
Okay. So we would at least have a ballpark of
And
the upper
that's
and
what
the
we did
bottom.
with the other parking requirements that we did change. We checked what different cities use. And
Okay.
there's,
So we just have to pick
planning
a sigma.
manuals, trip generation manuals, and things like that we use.
Anything else?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Casey, second by Schmokey. Sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.